Hey everyone, welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. I'm here to share real-life stories about mysterious happenings that might help you relax and drift off to sleep. Before we start, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. It all began on an early Saturday morning in April. I was out filling the bird feeder when I noticed something unusual on the lawn. Small, perfect circles dotted the grass about an inch across, each roughly the size of a golf ball. They were slightly darker than the surrounding grass. At first, I thought they were just dead spots or maybe fertilizer burn, but I hadn't applied anything that season. Curious, I bent down and touched one. The grass wasn't just dead, it was crisp, as if scorched by heat. Not burnt black, but dry and brittle, like someone had hit it with a heat lamp. What struck me was how uniform these circles were. No random patches, no footprints, no tire marks, just neat little circles. 10 of them, spaced exactly apart. 3 rows, with one more off to the side, like an unfinished corner. I didn't think much of it initially, assuming maybe a kid had left something hot in the yard, or someone had tossed cigarette butts overnight. The next morning, I checked again. The circles were still there, same size and position, but now there were more. Another row filling out the corner, creating a complete 4x4 square. That's when things started feeling strange. I pulled up the security camera footage. 2 cameras cover the yard, one on the back porch, one by the side gate. They run all night and save to a local drive. I watched the entire night on double speed. Nothing. The porch light flickered from bugs, but no people, no animals, no movement near the grass. Over the next few nights, I left the cameras running as usual. Every morning, more circles appeared. Always the same size, same spacing. The grid kept growing. By the 4th morning, it had expanded to cover almost half the yard. Perfect rows, maybe an inch deep, no tracks leading to or from them, no footprints, no disturbances, just these precise circles. After discovering strange circles in my yard, I decided to ask him if he'd noticed anything unusual. He hadn't seen anything strange in his own yard, no odd noises, lights, or unusual occurrences. When I showed him my yard, he stared for a moment before declaring, "That's no natural." Hearing someone else confirm my suspicions made everything feel more significant. That night I stayed vigilant, sitting by the back door with the porch light off and curtains slightly parted, watching the yard. The night was quiet, with just a little wind and a couple of owls. Around 3:20 a.m., the motion light on the far side of the yard blinked on for a second. I leaned forward, squinting, but saw nothing. It went dark again. In the morning, I checked the cameras. 8 new circles had appeared, perfectly spaced 12 inches apart from center to center, like a machine-laid grid. I tried marking the newest row with flags, and by the next morning the flags remained untouched, but new circles had been burned between them, as if something passed through without disturbing the markers. My investigation intensified. I started leaving a cheap drone with a GoPro hovering over the yard. The footage recorded normally until 2:47 a.m., when it suddenly became pure static, like old TV interference. This continued until 3:12 a.m., when it returned to normal, showing just the lawn. The timestamps were intact, with 25 minutes of unexplained static. That same night, I found 3 small burn marks on my front lawn, an area without camera coverage. No one could have accessed the area without triggering the driveway lights, yet nothing had been disturbed. Seeking some insight, I casually asked neighbors at the HOA if they'd seen anything similar. Most responded with chuckles, with some joking about crop circles. Julia, one of the neighbors, asked if I meant brown spots, but I knew this was something different. Obsessing wouldn't help, and they remained exactly as they first appeared, etched into my lawn like permanent marks. The lawn guy who came out couldn't explain them. He said the soil looked fine and the damage didn't match any lawn disease or pest problem he'd ever seen. My neighbor, who lives 4 streets down, had similar circles near her back fence. She initially thought they were just fungus. When I drove over that afternoon, we compared them. About 6 or 7 circles, same size and shape. Neither of us had cameras to capture how they formed. By midday, the circles in my yard had stopped appearing. We tried reseeding one of them, but nothing grew. The seeds just sat there, as if the ground underneath was no longer real soil. Sometimes, I'd wake up around 3 a.m. for no reason. No noise, no dream, just suddenly alert, like something had tapped me on the shoulder. I stopped looking out the window when this happened. I was sitting in my truck at the grocery store parking lot when I noticed a missed call. It was from an unknown number, time-stamped at 2:37 p.m. I saw it at 2:52, and strangely, my phone hadn't rung. Reception can be spotty in town, but I usually get voicemails. This one appeared without any notification, just sitting in my call log. When I hit play, static filled my ears, low and broken, like an old radio trying to tune in. Then mechanical clicking started, sharp but uneven, like a loose gear catching randomly. Just as I was about to delete it, I heard a whisper. It was my own voice, but not quite right. I caught what sounded like the word Corin, something I've never said before, spoken in a quiet, afraid tone. I played it again. Same static, same clicking, same whisper. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day, had been home until coming into town, with no calls or messages. I definitely hadn't recorded anything. I don't even use voice memos. Checking the call logs again confirmed it. No number, no contact, just that strange message. Now, I had been through my voicemails from the last few months, and nothing had ever felt like this before. Most were typical. Pharmacy reminders, my brother calling from the road, my mum forgetting a movie's name. But this one was different. During the drive home, I tried rationalizing what I'd heard. Maybe a pocket recording glitch or some weird echo from a previous call, but the clicking didn't make sense. More unsettling was the voice itself. It sounded like me, but not quite, as if I'd been pushed through something distorted. That night, I left my phone on the kitchen table and attempted to forget about it. I made dinner, half-watched some show, barely paying attention. Around midnight, I checked the phone again. No new calls or texts, but the battery had mysteriously dropped from 82% to 14%. Even though it had just been sitting there, the device felt warm, not hot, just like it had been running something. Battery usage showed nothing unusual, no background apps. I charged the phone and went to bed. At 3:30 a.m., a single vibration woke me. Not a call or text, just one buzz. I grabbed the phone from the nightstand, but the screen was black. No notifications, no alerts. When I turned it on and checked everything, no new messages appeared. The unknown voicemail remained, with the same timestamp still unplayable except through the voicemail menu directly. Attempting to save or forward the file resulted in nothing. It just kept spinning. The next day, I showed it to a tech-savvy friend. He listened once and suggested it was probably interference, maybe a stray signal from a CB radio. When I asked if he heard the voice, he agreed it didn't sound like me, but more like someone doing an impression. We tried transfer the file to his laptop to clean it up or isolate the voice, but nothing worked. Not through text, email, Bluetooth, or even a direct cable connection. The phone wouldn't show the voicemail folder when plugged in, skipping over it like it didn't exist. That night, I left my phone in the living room and tried sleeping without it. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up with a strange sensation, as if someone had just walked past the bedroom door. The feeling was unmistakable, like narrowly missing someone's presence. I turned on the light and went upstairs. Every room checked. Doors locked, windows shut, nothing disturbed. The house was silent. But then the phone caught my eye. It was lit up on the coffee table. No notifications, just the screen on, as if it had been tapped. I picked it up. The voicemail app was open, paused at the exact moment my voice said a specific word on the waveform. I closed it and powered the phone down completely, leaving it off the rest of the night. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The voicemail was gone. Not in deleted messages, not in archives, just vanished. I brushed it off as a glitch. 4 nights later, it happened again. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up for no clear reason. The phone was completely shut down, yet the screen was glowing, just the battery icon and a dim backlight. Holding the power button did nothing. It wouldn't turn on or off. After a minute, the screen dimmed again. Morning brought normalcy. When I powered up the phone, everything worked fine except for a new unknown call log entry from 2:37 a.m., no voicemail. Just a blank entry like a missed call that never rang. I started keeping the phone off at night, battery removed, stored in a drawer across the room. That worked for a while. One afternoon while doing laundry, I heard a faint sound from the bedroom, a low crackling noise like a record looping. Following the sound to the drawer, I found the phone powered off, battery in my hand, yet the speaker emitting a low rhythmic pop. 4 clicks, then silence. 4 clicks, then silence. I dropped the phone in the garage and switched to an old flip phone. The smartphone remains untouched, wrapped in a towel inside a shoebox. Sometimes I still wake around 2:30 for no reason. Not every night, but often enough to notice. When I do, there's this urge to say something, a word just out of reach, on the tip of my tongue. But I never say it. I won't. It started with our backyard motion sensor light coming on around midnight, just a basic floodlight with a camera, set up after some neighborhood break-ins to help us feel safer. That night, something was different. At first, I assumed it might be an animal or insect setting off the sensor. Our yard has lots of trees, and shadows often move with night winds. Then it started happening repeatedly. Always after midnight, the light would click on, the camera would record for a minute, and then shut off. Each morning I checked the footage but found absolutely nothing. No figures, no shadows, no movement at all. Just an empty, dark yard illuminated by the floodlight. My wife thought I was overthinking things, suggesting the camera might be faulty or the sensor too sensitive. But the incidents became more irregular. Sometimes it was 1:30 a.m., other times 3 a.m., and once even. Close to 4 a.m., the pattern remained consistent. Light on, camera recording, then off. What truly bothered me was the precision. The sensor never failed, yet the camera never captured anything. It felt like something was triggering the motion sensor, but deliberately avoiding detection. We tried everything, checking the sensor and camera, replacing batteries, adjusting angles, even cleaning the lens in case an insect was nearby. One night, I decided to watch from the kitchen window. The house was silent, children asleep, street lights casting long shadows across the lawn. Around 2:15 a.m., the light clicked on. I saw nothing. Stepping outside quietly, I found the air cool and still. I scanned the yard carefully. Not a leaf moved, no animals present, the grass completely motionless. A few nights later, my phone buzzed with an alert from the motion sensor camera. I pulled up the live feed, the yard lit by harsh white light. Zooming in slowly, I expected to see something, a stray cat, a raccoon, anything, but the screen showed only still grass and shadows. And I kept watching the camera feed, my attention fixed on the empty yard. Shadows flickered slightly in the breeze. Right as I was about to turn off the camera, something caught my eye. A subtle distortion appeared on the left edge of the frame, a shimmer in the air that didn't feel like heat rising from hot asphalt. It flickered for just a second and then vanished. When I blinked and looked again, it was gone. I rewound the footage repeatedly, confirming the faint, brief ripple. That night, sleep came hard. Over the next week, the motion sensor started acting strange. It would trigger twice in a row, or with hours between alerts. Each time, the camera showed nothing unusual, just the empty yard, trees swaying gently, branches casting shadows in the floodlight, hoping to catch whatever was triggering the day. Sensor, I set up a second camera from a different angle. This one was a regular security camera with night vision. For several nights, nothing happened. Then the motion sensor tripped again, and this second camera showed nothing either. One night, something new emerged. Around 3 a.m., when the sensor went off, I noticed the night vision revealed an area of complete darkness. This wasn't just dark, it was like the infrared couldn't reflect anything from that patch of yard. A hole in the night, right in the middle of the grass. The rest of the yard remained clear, trees and fence visible in grey tones. But this spot was pure black. The next morning, I investigated the yard closely. The grass looked slightly flattened, but otherwise normal. No scorch marks, no wetness, no signs of anything unusual. Strangely, this spot seemed to change subtly with each motion sensor trigger. Sometimes wider, sometimes narrower. The grass compression varied each time. I started waking up just before the sensor scheduled trigger, around 2 or 3 a.m. The timing wasn't exact, but consistent enough to suggest a pattern. One night, after another motion sensor alert, I stepped outside to investigate. The street was empty, silent, except for my footsteps on the pavement. Cold air surrounded me as I stood in the yard, searching for any sign of what might be causing these disturbances. I first noticed it on a black patch the camera had picked up. At first, the grass looked normal, but something felt off. I strained to hear anything, and then a low humming started, barely audible, more like a vibration you could feel in your chest than a sound your ears picked up. I looked around trying to find the source, but there was nothing. The humming didn't move or get louder. It just hung in the air, The hair on my arms stood up, and I felt cold, like someone was watching me in the dark. After a minute, the humming stopped, and the motion sensor light shut off. I stayed outside a bit longer, but everything returned to stillness and quiet. The next day, I checked with neighbors to see if anyone else had noticed anything strange. Nobody had. The street was quiet and normal, with no reports of unusual activity. I began questioning my own senses. Was I losing my mind? Could the sensor be faulty? Was I just tired and making up stories? Yet every time the motion sensor went off, the camera showed only empty space. That black patch remained, and the strange distortion flickered sometimes in the footage, like a heat wave or a ripple in reality. A few weeks later, I repositioned the camera, angling it differently in hopes of catching something new. The sensor continued triggering at odd hours, always late at night. One night around 1:45 a.m., I opened the app and checked the live feed. Initially, everything seemed normal. Then, right at the edge of the frame, I saw it again, the same faint shimmer, like air wavering over a hot road, but colder. When I zoomed in, my phone screen flickered. The shimmer stretched out briefly, resembling a thin shape moving slowly through the frame. It wasn't solid or bright, just a bending of the air. A subtle change in how light moved across the yard. The motion sensor light stayed on for 2 minutes before shutting off, and the shimmer disappeared. I sat in the dark, phone in hand, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The rest of the night passed quietly. Afterward, the sensor's pattern remained unchanged, continuing to trigger at random late-night hours. The camera never showed anything concrete, just the empty yard and that strange distortion flickering at the edges. I didn't discuss it much after a while. When my wife asked if I was okay, I simply said the camera was acting up again. Some nights, I would just watch from inside the house, staring at the yard. And I woke up groggy just after 6 a.m., checking my phone and catching the sight of my wristwatch. Something was wrong. The second hand was frozen precisely at 3:33 a.m. Normally, I wouldn't think much about such things. I'm not into conspiracy theories, but the details were strange. My watch was new and had never stopped before. My phone's battery was almost full when I went to bed, and the 27-minute gap in the logs didn't match any restart pattern I'd seen. That evening, the watch remained stuck at 3:33. I tried resetting it, but nothing worked. The phone functioned normally, yet the mysterious gap persisted in its logs. Through the window, I kept watching the yard. When the sensor triggered the light, the scene was always the same. Complete stillness. No animals, no shadows, no movement. Just a quiet space bathed in artificial light. Yet the feeling of being watched never left me. As night fell, I went to bed around 11:30 p.m., placing my phone on the nightstand. The watch was still frozen. Something felt different. The silence seemed heavier, the air thick with an unexplained tension. Unable to sleep, my mind kept circling back to the unexplained gap and the motionless watch. Suddenly, a soft buzzing sound emerged, like a radio tuning between stations. Turning towards the window revealed only darkness. The sound vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Over the next few days, strange occurrences multiplied. Lights flickered without reason. The thermostat would mysteriously change settings. Each incident added to the growing unease that something undefined was happening. The persistent silence, the unmoving watch, the unexplained gaps, all pointed to something just beyond understanding. Watching, waiting, but never fully revealing itself. Strange things started happening with my watch. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, nothing was there. One evening, while cooking, a buzzing sound grew louder from the living room. I investigated, expecting maybe an old radio or kitchen appliance malfunctioning, but all devices were off. The sound vanished the moment I turned on the light. I tried recording on my phone, hoping to capture something, yet nothing appeared. No sound, no interference, no glitches. The watch remained frozen at 3:33. A watch repair shop couldn't explain its odd behavior. Internally, everything seemed fine, the battery worked perfectly, and no mechanical issues were detected. That night, I watched the wall clock approach 3:33 a.m., waiting to see if the watch might move. At exactly 3:33, my phone screen went black momentarily before lighting up without any notifications. The next morning, I discovered another silent gap in the logs, precisely 27 minutes long and starting at 3:33 a.m., determined to understand what was happening. I set up a night-long surveillance. I sat in the living room with my phone recording and the watch on the table. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then 1 o'clock, then 2 a.m. The watch stubbornly remained unchanged. A soft buzzing came and went, raising goosebumps on my neck. At 3:33, the buzzing intensified like a swarm of bees inside my head. My phone screen flickered, and the recording paused for exactly 27 minutes before resuming. The watch still showed 3:33. Unsettled, I stopped wearing the watch and stored it in a drawer. Silent phone gaps continued, always 27 minutes long, always starting at 3:33 a.m., but nothing else occurred. Weeks later, I discovered the second hand moving again, as if reset to the current time. Phone logs showed normal activity during that period. I still can't explain what happened. Some experiences defy rational understanding. Passed, and something kept happening at a specific time every night. My watch seemed frozen, as if marking a significant moment. These days, I don't wear that watch anymore. But occasionally, when I glance at a clock on my phone around 3:33, I feel that same odd weight in the air, like the world is pausing, holding its breath for just a moment. My solo hike that day had started normally enough. Late spring, with clear skies and slightly cooler temperatures than expected, birds and wind moved through the trees, creating familiar forest sounds. I'd been taking occasional photos, capturing the little details most people overlook. Nothing seemed unusual at first. By mid-afternoon, I reached a clearing near the ridge. The view was spectacular. A patchwork of trees and farmland stretching out below, fading into the distant horizon. As I slowly turned, capturing different angles with my camera, everything felt perfectly calm. Then, right as I pressed the shutter for what I thought would be a great wide shot, something strange happened. A sudden, silent white light flashed, not from the sun, not a reflection, but a sharp burst that seemed to come from nowhere. It was like someone had taken a photo from a different angle, yet I was completely alone. No people, no animals, just the empty clearing. When I checked my camera screen, the photo showed the flash right over the treetops. But when I looked with my own eyes, nothing was there. Just the usual green and brown of the forest. At first, I tried to shrug it off as a camera glitch or lens flare, but something felt deeply wrong. That crawling sensation that makes your skin prickle. I packed up my camera and started back down the trail. Almost immediately, a low, thin mist began rolling in. It crept along the ground, slowly thickening until I was walking through a fog that limited my visibility to barely 15 feet. The temperature dropped noticeably, even though the sun was still out. The mist made everything unnaturally quiet. Birds stopped singing. Leaves stopped rustling. I could barely hear my own footsteps on the dirt path. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath, suspended in an inexplicable moment of silent anticipation. The fog closed in, dense and disorienting. At first, a subtle sensation crept over me. Something was watching. Not just a passing thought, but a real, pressing weight. I spun around repeatedly, searching through the misty tree line, but saw nothing definitive. Just shadows. Shifting shapes that could mean everything or nothing. My pace continued, attempting to convince myself this was mere nerves. But the feeling persisted, growing more intense with each step. Near a fallen log, I paused to catch my breath and retrieved the camera, hoping its flash might reveal something hidden. The device was malfunctioning. Its screen flickered, photos corrupting into static lines. Turning it off and on made no difference. Around me, the mist swirled like a living thing, making the trail increasingly difficult to follow. I realized I hadn't seen any trail markers for some time. No blazes, no worn paths. It was as if the trail simply vanished. My heartbeat accelerated. Panic threatened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Through the fog, a faint shape emerged, perhaps a rock or old tree stump. As I approached, it seemed to shift, almost watching me in return. I decided to wait, sitting on a nearby rock and trying to steady my breathing. The silence was overwhelming. No sounds penetrated the mist, no birds, no wind, no insects, just thick, curling fog, After what felt like an eternity, the mist began to thin. Standing, I attempted to reorient myself. Something was wrong with my devices. My watch's hands spun lazily, its digital display blank. My phone showed no signal, no GPS, just a black screen. I walked cautiously, unsure whether I was moving forward or circling endlessly. The sensation of being observed never left. Then, through the fog, a cluster of lights appeared. Unlike any campfire or lantern, they pulsed gently, white and blue, reminiscent of oversized fireflies. Steady, unmoving. I tried calling out, but my voice seemed weak, swallowed by the surrounding mist. As I approached the lights, the feeling in my chest grew more intense. I was planning to check the farthest field, the one I barely use anymore. Last year, I let it rest. Didn't plan anything here. Figured I'd just mow the weeds down before summer really kicked in. I woke up early like usual and grabbed my coffee from the kitchen. It was still dark outside, the kind of early morning where the sky hangs heavy and the world feels extra quiet. When I stepped outside, the air was cool but still sticky from the day before. The house was the usual mess of shadows and creaks, the kind of silence that fills a place where nothing's happened yet. I grabbed my flashlight and keys, tossed on my jacket, and walked out to the truck. The drive to the field was maybe a 10-minute ride on a gravel road winding past a few old barns and patches of woods. The moon was low and clouded over, casting a dim, pale light. I parked at the edge and stepped out. The air smelled like earth and grass and something faintly sweet, maybe wildflowers coming up. I started walking across the field toward the back corner where the grass was thicker and wild. That's when I saw it. My surroundings tightened like something was pressing down on me. I stopped and looked around again. No movement, no shapes, just those lights watching. Suddenly, the lights blinked out all at once. The mist thickened again and everything went dark. I reached for my flashlight, but the batteries were dead. I moved cautiously, feeling my way back the way I thought I came. After a few minutes, the mist began to lift slowly, the trees becoming clearer. My watch had stopped spinning, showing the correct time again. I didn't know how long I'd been in that fog. My phone came back to life with full bars. The camera worked again, too, but all the pictures from the misty part of the hike were blank, just black frames. I got back to my car as the sun was setting. The normal sounds of the forest returned, birds calling, leaves rustling, a distant dog barking. I didn't say anything to anyone for a while. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Some days later, I went through the photos again. The one with the flash of white light was still here, staring back at me like a question I couldn't answer. I still don't know what it was, or why the mist came out of nowhere. The way the forest went silent, the way I felt, watched but never saw anyone. It was real, though, and I've been back to that spot a few times since. Nothing else happened, but I don't think I'll ever forget how it felt, like something was just beyond the edge of sight, waiting. I was out in the field when something caught my eye. What looked like a burn mark or old tire tracks turned out to be something entirely different. A massive, perfect circle, stretched about 30 feet across, pressed flat into the grass and weeds. The edges were unnaturally sharp, as if cut with scissors. Not a single blade of grass stuck out, not one stem broken, just perfectly flattened plants forming this precise circle. I searched for any explanation. No footprints, no tire marks, nothing. The soil remained undisturbed, with no crushed weeds leading in or out. I circled twice, sweeping my flashlight over every inch. This was far from any roads or houses, and I would have noticed if someone had entered the field. The grass was wet with dew, untouched except for the flat circle. The hairs on my arms stood up, but I tried to rationalize it as just a weird natural occurrence. Maybe wind or rain pressed it down, but the shape was far too precise for that. When I crouched down and ran my hand over the grass, it wasn't dry or brittle. Instead, it felt gently pushed down, yet firm, as if holding its shape. Looking up, I noticed the clouds breaking apart, a few stars peeking through. The moon was almost gone. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the screen went fuzzy and dimmed on its own. I shook it and tried again. Same result. The battery was fine, but the screen looked like static. Turning slowly, I saw the field behind me was pitch black. For a moment I thought I saw movement at the tree line, like a shadow shifting between the trees. I blinked hard and aimed my flashlight that way, but nothing was there. Only the distant sound of a tractor working somewhere else on the farm broke the silence. As I started walking back, something made me stop. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw the circle again, faint in the moonlight. It almost looked like it was glowing slightly. But when I blinked, the glow vanished. Back in my truck, my hands were sweaty. I kept staring at the field, but the circle was hard to see from a distance. I called my neighbor Dave, hoping he might have seen something. He was out checking fences and hadn't noticed anything unusual. I didn't want to mention the circle just yet. I wasn't sure if I was imagining things. Driving back toward the house, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, the mysterious circle haunting my thoughts. Night. A light flickered near the edge of the field one night, a faint white pulse that vanished before I could focus. Sleep became impossible. My mind kept circling back to the strange circle, how the grass was perfectly pressed with no tracks, no explanation. Multiple times that night, I got up to check the window. The field remained dark, nothing but stars overhead. The next morning, curiosity pulled me back with friends from town. We walked to the circle, examining its sharp-edged perimeter where the grass lay impossibly flat. We searched for footprints or anything unusual, but the ground was dry and undisturbed. My friend claimed to detect a faint smell like ozone or burning rubber, though I noticed nothing. We made half-hearted jokes about aliens and crop circles, but I couldn't laugh. This wasn't like the messy patterns you see on TV. This circle was precise, carefully laid out. Later that day in town, the feed store clerk mentioned strange lights some people had seen over the county line. No specifics, just weird lights. I said nothing about the circle. Back home, I checked the field again. The circle remained unchanged. Grass pressed flat, seemingly untouched overnight. Days passed, and I kept returning, trying to understand. Sometimes low hums or soft crackles would interrupt the silence. One night, I left a camera aimed at the circle, hoping to capture evidence. By morning, the memory card was gone. I searched everywhere, the field, surrounding trees, dirt road, but found no trace. Stranger occurrences mounted some nights. My phone lost signal completely near the field. Other times, the stars seemed unnaturally bright, as if the sky itself had shifted. I tried convincing myself it was just farming stress. Then, one morning, my watch was off by several hours. Something was definitely not right. We first noticed it about 3 weeks ago. My girlfriend Anna and I had just finished dinner, sitting out on the back porch of my place, which is in a pretty quiet spot on the edge of town. There's a hill, maybe 2 miles away, nothing much on it, except trees and what we thought was a single radio tower with a blinking red light on top. It was around 10:15 p.m., and I was about to head inside when Anna pointed at the hill. "Look," she said, "do you see that light over there?" I turned to the hill, and sure enough, there was a small light near the summit, flickering in a slow, deliberate way. At first, I assumed it was the usual tower light, but this was different. It wasn't blinking on and off rapidly like hazard lights. Instead, it pulsed slowly, 3 pulses in a row, spaced evenly apart. Then nothing for a while. Then 3 more pulses over and over. We watched it for a few minutes. The pulses were soft, not harsh. Later, around noon one day, my watch said 3 a.m. I reset it and figured the battery might be dying. But the next day, the same thing occurred with different times. I asked folks at the local diner if anyone else had experienced weird time shifts or odd lights. Some laughed, others said the power grid was old and glitchy. No one mentioned crop circles. A week after I first noticed it, I drove out to the field at dusk. The sky was fading, and the air was heavy with moisture. As I walked in, the circle looked darker than before, almost like it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. I stood in the center and suddenly felt cold, like a breeze had whipped through, even though the air was still. I turned to leave, but the silence around me felt thick, like something was watching. I blinked, and at the edge of the circle, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow, slipping between 2 trees. I called out, but only the wind answered. Back in my truck, I started driving home. My headlights flickered briefly, and for a second, the whole dashboard went dark. I pulled over, waited a minute, then everything came back on like nothing happened. By the time I reached the house, the sky was black and full of stars. I locked the doors and sat inside, thinking about the field and the circle. I don't know what made it or why it's here. Nobody else around seemed to have noticed. It's still out there, pressed flat and quiet. And sometimes when I'm out late and the wind's just right, I swear I can hear that low hum again, faint and strange, coming from the far corner of the field. I first noticed the light on the hill weeks ago. It appeared bright yet subtle, like a dim beacon with an almost deliberate pattern. 3 slow pulses would emerge precisely at 10:15 p.m. every single night, regardless of weather conditions. Curiosity got the better of me. Using binoculars from my porch, I realized this wasn't a typical blinking signal. Instead, it looked like a soft, hovering orb just above the treetops. It didn't seem attached to anything solid, and its consistent timing made it impossible to dismiss as a random reflection. Anna encouraged me to document it. I grabbed my DSLR with a zoom lens and recorded the phenomenon. During playback, we noticed something peculiar. The light's edges were unnaturally sharp, with no blur or distortion. Our investigation led us to drive closer to the hill. We parked at the base and started hiking up the dirt path. The woods remained eerily quiet, broken only by occasional leaf rustling. As we climbed, an unsettling sensation grew, a feeling of being watched. Glancing back revealed nothing, just long shadows dancing from our flashlight beams. Halfway up, we paused in a small clearing and looked down toward town. The sky was clear, the air still. Surprisingly, the summit light had vanished. We waited, and exactly at 10:15 p.m., it reappeared with its familiar 3-pulse sequence. Then something changed. A sudden chill swept through the air. Anna's face turned pale as she stared intently, and that's when I saw it too, a second fainter light emerging beside the first, and was almost invisible at first, like a weak star struggling through the branches. Steady, lower down the hill, closer to the trees. I didn't pulse, just stayed there, glowing softly. We didn't say anything. Neither of us moved. The 3 pulses stopped, and the lower light stayed on for a few minutes before vanishing silently. We didn't stick around after that. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I swear at one point I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving just beyond the tree line. Something too big to be an animal, but it disappeared before I could get a clear look. Back in the car, Anna and I both stayed quiet, neither of us wanting to admit how unnerved we were. Over the next week, we kept watching the hill from the porch. The main light stuck to its pattern. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. But the second light came and went randomly, sometimes appearing right before or after the pulses, sometimes not at all. One night, I decided to drive up again, alone this time, to get a better look. I parked where the dirt road meets the last stretch of trees and climbed out with my flashlight and camera. The hill was steep and slippery in spots, the ground covered in fallen leaves. I was halfway up when I heard a faint humming sound like electricity, low and constant. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I stopped, scanning the woods with my light. The humming stopped suddenly, like someone flipped a switch. Ahead, the trees opened to a small plateau with scattered rocks and patches of grass. I shone my light around, but it felt wrong, like I was being watched from the shadows. Then the light pulses started again from the summit, glowing through the trees. I looked toward the glow and realized the pulsing light wasn't coming from the tower. The tower was dark. The light was somewhere else, just beyond the tree line, in a place where no path led. I pulled out my phone and tried to call Anna, but no signal. My breath fogged in the cold air as I stepped back down, feeling more exposed than I had all night. On the way down, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, quick and light, but when I turned, there was nothing. The next morning, I told Anna what I'd heard. She said she felt the same way the last time we were up here, like something was close but hidden. We agreed to stop going up the hill. A few days later, I checked the news. No reports of strange activity or people missing in the area, just the usual weather and local events. The light kept showing up. Same pattern every night, even when I wasn't watching. Sometimes at night, from my window, I stare at the hill and wait for those 3 pulses. I wonder about their meaning or who might be sending them. It's a nightly occurrence, like a silent message. Maybe it's just me, but it feels significant. When it's late outside, there's a faint humming at the edge of hearing, almost as if the hill itself is alive and watching. In late November, I went hunting alone near Red Pines. It's a vast public land in the Northwoods, dense with trees and crisscrossed by old logging roads and deer trails. I'd been here before, but always with company. This time was different. I drove out just after dawn, parking off a side road and hiking several miles in. My goal was to get away from other hunters. The silence was complete. No trucks, no distant gunshots. The kind of quiet where every sound becomes noticeable. Wind rustling trees, my own breathing, boots crunching frozen ground. No deer that morning, but I found fresh tracks and decided to follow them deeper into the forest. I navigated old school, just a paper map and compass. Getting lost wasn't a concern. Around mid-morning, I sat on a fallen log for a snack. That's when things got strange. I noticed my own boot prints nearby and initially thought I'd accidentally looped back. But my compass and the sun confirmed I was still heading northeast. As I continued, the woods felt different. The trees looked familiar, yet something felt off. That sensation of being watched. I tried to dismiss it as a common feeling when alone in the wilderness. 30 minutes later, I climbed a low ridge to get my bearings. From the top, I spotted a small clearing and more of my own tracks. They curved through the snow in an unusual arc. Investigating closer, I realized something unsettling. The trail was mine. Same tread pattern, same spacing, same slight heel drag. Kneeling down, I examined the prints. They were recent. No snow, no frost. Couldn't be more than an hour old, but I was certain I'd never turned around. My compass still pointed northeast. I backtracked about 20 yards, puzzled and uneasy. Everything said I was heading west toward the road, but somehow I'd returned to the same spot. I hadn't backtracked, I would have noticed. I'd been carefully following game trails in a mostly straight line, paying close attention to my route. Earlier, I'd marked a tree with orange flagging tape to help me track my progress. About an hour later, I saw the exact same tree again. Same flag, same torn bark. The rail I'd just made had merged back into the one I was following perfectly. Same direction, same orientation, like I'd walked in a giant loop without knowing it. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe the terrain had subtly curved. Maybe I'd misread something. But I knew I wasn't lost or wandering randomly. I stopped and listened. No animals, no birds, just dead quiet. That's when I heard crunching, slow footsteps in the snow coming from the trees behind me. I turned fast, hand on my rifle. Nothing was there, just empty woods. I called out, thinking maybe another hunter was nearby, but nobody answered. I waited. The sound didn't return. I started walking faster, trying to reach the road. I figured if I kept going in a straight line, I'd eventually find it. But the light was fading, and the terrain was dipping low. I'd already spent most of the day out here. Then I saw something ahead, a glint of light through the trees. Not like sunlight. It was steady, pale, just hovering there. As I approached, I saw 3 soft white lights in a straight line, like someone holding a flashlight sideways. They weren't moving, just suspended about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. I crouched behind a stump and watched. The lights didn't flicker or bob. No sound, no movement. I sat there for what felt like minutes, just staring. Then, without warning, the lights went out all at once. No fade, just gone. I started moving again, slower this time, sticking close to trees. I felt completely turned around. Every part of the forest looked the same, every tree, every dip in the land. At some point I passed another set of my boot prints. They weren't crossing my path, but running parallel, like another version of me was walking just off to the side. I stopped and followed those tracks for a few minutes, trying to understand what was happening. It was getting dark, the sun nearly down, and the air turning cold. Something felt off almost immediately. My footprints matched the worn patch on my boot heel exactly, then suddenly stopped mid-step. Just vanished. No turning around, no fading, just gone. Fresh snow surrounded the spot, completely untouched. That empty space where the next footstep should have been was the worst part. I started walking fast, no longer trying to be quiet. All I wanted was to get out of there. After what felt like forever, I heard a faint car engine humming in the distance. Following the sound, I finally saw the road through the trees. My truck was right where I'd left it. I didn't look back, just got in, started the engine, and drove. Back home, I checked the map, trying to trace my route, but no matter how I plotted it, nothing made sense. I shouldn't have ended up where I did, especially not twice, and not without realizing I'd turned. Months later, I went back with a friend. We stayed close to the road and didn't see anything strange. I didn't mention what had happened, not then. Weeks before that incident, I was standing on the Glenhurst station platform, Part of my usual weekday routine around 6:40 p.m., early March, still cold, but the days were getting longer. A dim bluish light hung in the sky, neither day nor night. The platform was sparsely populated, with people spread out, absorbed in phones and music. Out of habit, I glanced down the tracks, even though the train was still minutes away. That's when I saw it. Hovering about 20 or 30 feet above the tracks, halfway down the platform. It appeared suddenly, silently, no sound, no movement, just there as if it had been sitting still all along. This wasn't a drone. I know what drones look and sound like. This object was different, completely motionless, making no noise. Its shape was unlike anything I'd seen fly before. Oval-like, almost transparent, but not quite. Imagine heat waves on asphalt, where everything behind them seems to bend and distort. A faint shimmer danced around its edges. No flashing, no glowing, just a subtle disruption in the air. A strange light caught my attention, soft and pulsing. I glanced around to see if anyone else had noticed. The woman nearby was staring too, her mouth slightly open. A guy with a backpack walked up and did a double take, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Do you see that?" the woman whispered. I nodded. We stood still, watching, not moving or making a sound. Something felt off, like I was present but not really there. A guy in a suit on the platform raised his phone to record, and others quickly followed. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, zooming in. Nothing. The screen showed only tracks and sky, the shimmer and shape completely gone. I wiped the lens and tried switching to video, but still saw nothing. It was as if the camera couldn't perceive what we were seeing. The guy in the suit was frowning at his phone too. The woman next to me checked her device. "You're not seeing it on yours, right?" she asked. "No," I confirmed. "It's not showing up." The guy with the backpack chimed in. "What the hell is that thing?" We kept watching, frozen in place. Minutes passed, though it felt much longer. A quiet ripple of uncertainty spread across the platform. People seemed unsure if they were witnessing something real or losing their minds. Then someone called out, "Okay, does anyone else see like a floating jelly bean with a halo around it?" Immediately, 3 people responded, "Yes." This was the strangest part. Everyone described it identically, a jelly bean or egg-shaped object with a shimmering outline, wobbling in the air. No one mentioned a drone, balloon, or reflection. A few people tried walking closer, moving down the platform, but I remained still. Suddenly, it vanished. Not fading or flying away, just gone in an instant. No sound, no trace. Everyone froze, waiting for it to reappear. Then the train arrived, right on time, as if nothing had happened. Some people didn't board, standing and staring at the spot where the object had been. I got on, mostly out of habit. The woman who'd been standing next to me also boarded. We ended up sitting across from each other, silent, processing what we'd just experienced. On the train platform, I noticed something odd. "Did he just go away?" I asked. Then she slowly nodded, describing it like a light switch. The guy next to her confirmed he'd taken a dozen photos, but they were all empty. My phone showed the same thing, just blank images. I tried editing the pictures, adjusting the contrast, but nothing appeared. Yet I remembered exactly where I'd been standing, even holding my phone up to line it up with the spot. Later that night, I scanned local news sites, hoping someone else might have reported something. Finding nothing, I posted on a small commuter forum without mentioning specifics, just to see if anyone else had experienced something similar. 3 people responded, all saying they were at Glenhurst and saw the exact same thing. Their descriptions matched mine perfectly. A jelly bean-shaped, transparent object floating silently above the tracks. None had photos. One guy thought he'd recorded video, but it was just 30 seconds of empty sky. For the next few days, I returned to that platform, standing a little longer each time, watching the same patch of sky. Nothing happened. But on the 4th evening, I noticed a man further down the platform, staring straight ahead. When he looked over at me, it felt like we both understood we were there for the same reason. We said nothing, and when the train arrived, we both got on. This wasn't my first time watching the sky. For years, I'd been stargazing from a spot in the field behind my house. It was nothing fancy, just a fold-out lawn chair, a telescope on a cheap tripod, and an old thermos of coffee. The sky stays clear most nights, with low enough light pollution to see a good chunk of the Milky Way. I'm not a professional, but I enjoy cataloging what I see. Sketching constellations, logging satellites, sometimes trying to catch meteor showers. This particular incident began in early September, when the nights had just started cooling and I'd begun wearing a hoodie again. Around 10:30 I was pointing my telescope toward Cassiopeia, and I'd been tracking some double stars in the area when something caught my eye. Near the bottom arm of the W shape, one star wasn't behaving normally. Its movement was strange, not a typical atmospheric flicker, but a slow, rhythmic pulse barely visible unless you were really paying attention. I only noticed because it disrupted my sketching. Multiple glances confirmed it wasn't moving like a plane, just sitting there, subtly blinking. I marked it with a question mark and continued, but the next night it was different, slightly shifted from its previous position. I compared my sketches, confirming the tiny movement, definitely not my imagination. Over the next few nights, the pattern continued, a deliberate, consistent drift just outside Cassiopeia's main arm. I checked everything: flight paths, satellite maps, amateur astronomy forums. Nothing matched. No known satellite behaves this way. What struck me wasn't just the movement, but its seeming purpose. Each night, it drifted in the same direction, the same distance. An intentional trajectory, not random, but calculated. I told my astronomy enthusiast friend Tom. He came out with binoculars and saw it too. Not a plane, he said. And that flicker's too precise. We watched together for several nights. Same slow drift, same clean pulse. One night, it just stopped. Suspended, waiting. Coincidentally, my telescope lost focus precisely when pointed at its location. Every other part of the sky remained crisp, but this spot went soft. Not blurry, but somehow different. Something was definitely unusual about this celestial visitor. I've always been into amateur astronomy and night photography, so being outside with my camera around midnight or later isn't unusual for me. On this particular night, the sky was exceptionally clear. The lens wasn't cooperating, no matter how I adjusted it. Tom's binoculars worked fine, but even he said something looked off, like I wasn't quite present, just slightly behind something. When I tried taking a photo through the scope with my phone, nothing showed up. Just a black sky, despite me seeing the view clearly with my own eyes. We took a break for a few days, maybe to clear our heads, and I went back out around the middle of the month. The point of interest had completely moved out of Cassiopeia. Then I started noticing something different. Between 2 and 4 a.m. I'd see a faint streak in the sky, a slow, silent arc of light from the same region where the flickering point used to be. It wasn't a meteor. It moved too slowly and didn't burn out. It looked more like a shadow passing under the stars, similar to a bird silhouetted against a streetlight, but higher and completely silent. I saw this phenomenon maybe 3 times over 2 weeks. After the 3rd time, I noticed my backyard motion light started randomly activating around the same hours. I initially thought it was raccoons or deer, but when I checked, nothing was there. No movement, no sound. One night, I sat outside with the light unplugged, just watching. Around 3:15, the flicker started again, but this time closer, not in the sky, but over the field. About 100 feet off the ground, a faint, soft pulse hovered silently for around 10 seconds before fading. I didn't tell Tom. I didn't tell anyone. I stopped going out at night for a while. Weeks later, the star was simply gone. Not moved, not dimmed, just absent. That patch of sky felt different somehow, like my eyes wanted to skip over it, as if it were too empty. I kept checking afterward and even bought a better scope, but nothing ever returned. The motion light still flicks on some nights, always around 3 a.m., always when the sky is clear. The stars looked perfect that night. I set up my tripod in the backyard and began taking photos, pointing the camera straight up and capturing different parts of the sky. Between midnight and around 2 o'clock in the morning, I shot a series of images in a quiet, calm environment. Distant cars and rustling leaves were the only sounds. I felt completely alone, but in a good way. I appreciate that kind of solitude. The next day, I transferred the photos to my computer for review. Most looked typical. Sharp stars, visible constellations, and some satellite trails as thin lines of light. But something caught my eye. In every photo taken between midnight and 2, a blurry triangular shape appeared. It wasn't a clear object, more like a faint, smudged shadow consistently positioned near the center or just off to one side. This shape remained unchanged, with a peculiar color, a dull gray with a subtle glow around its edges. It didn't resemble any camera artifact I'd encountered before. Initially, I suspected a technical issue, perhaps a dirty lens or sensor problem. I meticulously cleaned the equipment, double-checked settings, and even took test shots during sunset and daytime. No triangular shapes emerged. The following night, I repeated the process, targeting the same area of sky and maintaining the same shooting intervals. Once again, the blurry triangle returned, identical in size and position. A growing sense of unease began to take hold. Something felt different while I was outside. The backyard's atmosphere grew heavy, as if an unseen presence hovered nearby. The neighborhood had fallen into an unusual silence. No barking dogs, no distant traffic, just an almost unnatural stillness. I glanced around repeatedly but saw nothing. My phone remained silent, leaving only the camera shutter's occasional click and my laptop's soft hum. Then I heard it, a faint mechanical clicking sound. It was subtle, embedded deep within the night's background noise, yet unmistakably present. Steady and rhythmic, almost like a clock's precise ticking. When I first heard the clicking, it sounded different, more metallic than anything I recognized. I tried to pinpoint its location, but it remained constant. The sound persisted for about 15 minutes, and I tried convincing myself it was something ordinary, maybe a generator or a distant radio tower. Yet something felt off about how silent everything else was. I went inside and checked the photos on my computer. The triangular shape appeared in every shot from that time window. Through the lenses, the stars looked perfectly normal, no blinking lights or unusual movements. Still, I sensed an invisible presence hovering just above the treetops, watching silently. Back inside, I discovered strange phone notifications. Random numbers had sent messages with unrecognizable symbols, like scrambled code. I deleted them as spam, but then another arrived, an audio file. When I played it, static gave way to the faint clicking sound from outside. Then came a whisper in a voice that sounded like mine, speaking an unknown word I couldn't understand. I checked my phone logs, confirming I hadn't called anyone or used any recording apps. My memory of the night remained clear, except for brief moments I couldn't account for. The next day, I examined everything, the triangle in the photos, the clicking sound, the cryptic phone message, trying to find connections. I considered showing the evidence to friends, but hesitated. Would they believe me or dismiss it as a camera glitch or prank? Eventually, the strange messages stopped completely, leaving me with more questions than answers. Note, I was working the night shift as a security guard at a small industrial park on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that's mostly empty overnight. A few warehouses, a couple of offices, and a fenced-off lot. The company was cheap on staff, so sometimes it was just me alone from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m., driving the rounds every hour, checking the doors and fences, making sure nothing was out of place. The radios they gave us were old, basic two-way models. Usually, they only crackled with static or the occasional check-in from the day crew or other guards. But on this particular night, things started getting weird. I was midway through my third round, cruising the lot in the company truck when the radio suddenly buzzed to life. It wasn't the usual beep or short burst. It was faint, almost like someone whispering. I turned the volume up, thinking maybe a guard was calling, but the voice wasn't clear. It was a soft murmur, almost indecipherable, buried in static. "Hello," I said into my own radio, expecting some reply. Nothing but static. I fiddled with the channel button, flipping through the frequencies, but only silence and static answered me. The weird part was I knew there weren't any other guards on duty. The schedule was posted on the break room wall, and I had checked before my shift. I was the only one out here after dark. I figured maybe the radio was picking up interference from something else, CB radios, truckers on the highway nearby, or even some random signal bouncing off the hills. That happens sometimes. But the whispers kept coming back every few minutes. They never lasted long. Just a few seconds of those soft, breathing sounds, too quiet and jumbled to make out any words. At first, I tried to ignore it, focus on the job, walk the fence lines, check the loading docks, the doors. Everything looked normal. But every time the radio crackled with those whispers, I felt this strange tension tighten up in my chest, like someone was nearby, watching me but staying just out of sight. On my fourth round, I parked the truck near one of the warehouses and stepped out to do a physical check of the back doors. The night was cool and the area was quiet. The clicking sound didn't come back, and the triangle shape disappeared from my photos. But the feeling stayed, the sense that something was here, watching just beyond what I could see. I still look up at the stars sometimes, camera ready, hoping to catch it again, but it hasn't shown up since. Nah. Quiet, except for the distant sounds of traffic on the highway about a mile away. Suddenly the radio buzzed again, the same soft whispering returned. This time I caught a faint word, maybe help or run. I wasn't sure. I called out into the radio, "Who's here?" half expecting no response. Then a sound from behind me, like a branch snapping. I spun around, flashlight in hand, but saw nothing except shadows of tall grass and the dark warehouse outline. The whispering started again, raising the hair on the back of my neck. I climbed back into the truck and decided to report the weird radio interference to the main office. I dialed my cell, but the call wouldn't connect. No bars, just no service. While not unusual for this remote park area, it added to my growing unease. On the radio, whispers kept appearing every few minutes, always the same faint, garbled murmurs, like someone trying to speak but cutting off mid-word. At one point, the voice seemed clearer yet distorted, almost underwater. I distinctly remember hearing a phrase that sounded like, "Can you hear me?" I stared at the radio, wondering if I was losing my mind. By the 6th hour, the whispers became constant, overlapping, layered, voices talking at once, though no words made sense. I tried turning the radio off and on, hoping to reset it. When powered back up, the static worsened, and whispers grew louder. The entire parking lot felt colder, heavier. I kept telling myself this was just a glitch or interference, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My eyes darted to the tree line beyond the fence. Seeing, I attempted to contact my supervisor on the company radio frequency, but received no response. It felt like I was completely alone. Later, I noticed the radio's small screen flickering, sometimes showing scrambled letters and numbers, sometimes going blank. The battery drained unusually fast, despite being fully charged when I started. I caught myself watching tree shadows more than the buildings. The whispers had transformed from soft murmurs to faint breathing mixed with static. At some point, I began wondering whether the voices were actually coming from the radio or if my mind was filling the silence. I kept checking my watch. Time crawled, but the radio clock seemed to glitch, skipping seconds or freezing momentarily before catching up. I thought about leaving early, but needed to finish my shift. Besides, something kept me there, a strange mix of curiosity and growing dread. I was driving home late one Friday night, taking the usual route through that stretch of highway between the city and the outskirts. It's a quiet road, mostly 2 lanes, lined with trees and only a handful of streetlights. I like this drive. It was peaceful, nothing hectic, just me on the road. About halfway through, just past that old gas station that's been closed for years, I noticed the digital clock on the big roadside billboards flickering. It's one of those flashy billboards with bright LED numbers showing time and temperature. It usually works fine, but sometimes, when power glitches, the clock resets or goes blank. That night was different. The clock wasn't just flickering once or twice, it kept resetting. Numbers would show for a moment, then jump back to 12 and start counting up again. Every reset coincided with a bright light flashing across the sky just above the treetops. At first, I thought it might be a plane or meteor. The light moved fast, a sharp streak almost too quick to track. It wasn't like slow-moving satellites or regular airplanes with blinking lights. This was bright white, clean, and sharp. And just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The weird part was how the billboard clock glitched exactly when the light crossed overhead. Numbers would reset at the same moment, like the light triggered it somehow. I slowed down and watched closely. The clock would run for maybe 30 seconds, then reset to 12 right as the light zipped past. I wasn't sure what I'd do or where I'd go. The highway was a good half hour away on foot. Around 5 a.m., the whispering finally stopped. The radio was silent, except for the usual static hum. I breathed easier, but still felt the weight of the night pressing in. I drove back to the main gate, double-checked the locks, and headed home as the sky began to lighten. When I got inside, I tossed the radio on the kitchen counter and didn't touch it again. I'm still not sure what I heard that night. Maybe interference from some unknown source, or maybe something else entirely. But every time I think about it, I remember that feeling, like there was someone or something close by, just out of reach, listening. And that's the part I can't explain. I pulled over to get a better look. The night was quiet except for the faint hum of the highway. As I stepped out of the car and looked up, the stars seemed ordinary, clear but unremarkable. Then, every minute or so, a bright flash would streak across the sky. My phone showed no signal, which struck me as weird given how close I was to town. I flipped through messages and photos, and everything looked normal, but the clock kept glitching. Something felt off. Minutes passed, and I noticed the trees near the billboard looked different, darker somehow, almost like they were absorbing light. I stared, but couldn't make out any shapes or movement, just an unsettling darkness. The clock reset again, and another light flashed overhead. This time, I caught a faint, low-frequency vibration, more felt than heard. It wasn't loud, but enough to make the hairs on my neck stand up. I sat back in the car, trying to rationalize what was happening. I told myself it was probably just electrical interference affecting the billboard. Maybe a nearby transformer was malfunctioning, and the light was unrelated. Then the billboard's power went out completely, the display went dark, the trees pitch black, and that humming sound grew slightly louder. No other cars were around, which was strange for a weekend night. After about a minute of silence, the billboard lights suddenly came back on. The clock was frozen at 12 and wouldn't change. I started the car and pulled back onto the road, glancing up at the sky. The flashes stopped. No more bright streaks, no more humming. My phone signal returned, and the time and date corrected themselves. The billboard clock began ticking forward again, as if nothing unusual had happened. I'm still not sure how long I was there or exactly what I witnessed. The entire incident lasted maybe 20 minutes. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting the flashes to restart or something to emerge from the trees, but nothing did. When I got home, I checked local news and weather stations. No mention of storms, electrical outages, or anything unusual in the area. I haven't returned to that spot since, but I drive that road occasionally. Sometimes I glance at the billboard clock as I pass. Now it works perfectly, just like it's supposed to. I mostly do wildlife photography. Nothing fancy, just the usual birds, deer, squirrels. One evening I was out in the woods just past sunset, hoping to capture some shots of deer and maybe a fox if I was lucky. I had my usual gear with me, plus my infrared camera. I like to use the IR cam for night shots because it picks up heat signatures, allowing me to see animals moving around in the dark, even when they're invisible to the naked eye. The forest was dense with thick pine trees and heavy underbrush. The trails were quiet. Not many people venture out here at night, which is exactly how I like it. Peaceful and dark, with only the sounds of the forest breaking the silence. I set up my gear in a small clearing about half a mile in, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a faint orange glow in the sky. After about 20 minutes of watching my infrared screen, I caught a few deer moving in the distance, their warm bodies glowing white. It was all pretty standard until something unusual caught my eye. About 50 yards from where I was sitting near a cluster of trees, the IR camera picked up a shape moving slowly through the forest. This shape was perfectly round, like a big circle drifting through the trees. The truly strange part was its heat signature, or rather, the complete lack of one. It appeared completely dark on the infrared, meaning no heat at all. At first, I thought it might be a camera glitch or a shadow, but it moved smoothly and consistently, not like a bug on the lens or a random smudge. I switched to regular night vision, hoping to catch a glimpse with my own eyes, but there was nothing, no light, no shape, just the usual dark forest. The circle moved slowly, maybe a couple of feet per second, weaving between trees without breaking a branch or disturbing leaves. It felt unnatural, like something fundamentally out of place. I watched for a few minutes, trying to determine if it could be some kind of animal, but there's nothing round or flat that moves like this in the woods. I even raised my voice, calling out to see if someone was playing a prank or if there was some equipment I didn't recognize. The forest simply echoed my shout back at me. No answer. After about 5 minutes, the shape disappeared, slowly moving toward a thicker part of the forest where the trees grow closer together. Still, Every once in a while, I swear I see a faint flicker or feel that same low hum for a second, like it's waiting to come back. But I was hiking back to the trailhead after my outdoor expedition, constantly feeling an eerie sense that something was watching me. Not just wildlife, but something else entirely. Quick glances caught fleeting shadows shifting between trees, yet when I turned to look directly, nothing was there. Back home, I reviewed the infrared camera footage. A black, smooth circle appeared in every clip from that time, silent and without heat. I tried finding rational explanations, maybe a cold object or piece of plastic floating, but its movement defied logic. It moved steadily on the ground, not drifting or falling. Since that day, I've returned to the spot several times, usually around dusk. The forest feels different now, heavier, with an air noticeably colder than it should be. The sensation of being watched remains almost constant. I've seen the circle again a few more times, always moving the same slow way, always without heat or sound. It doesn't make sense, yet it exists, drifting through the trees just beyond the edge of my comprehension. Another night, starting around 2:15 a.m. after returning from my sister's place in Vermont, something strange began. I had just turned off a podcast and was ready to sleep when a sound started building. Not sudden, but growing like a distant truck, yet deeper. A low-frequency hum felt more in my chest than my ears. Initially, I thought it was our temperamental furnace, but this felt different. The windows began vibrating subtly, flexing gently in their frames. My wife was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "You hear that?" I asked. She nodded. I got up and opened the blinds. The backyard was pitch black, no wind, no moving trees, yet the hum grew stronger, not louder, but more encompassing. It felt like it was surrounding our house. Our child called out from down the hall. I walked through the rooms. Living room, kitchen, everything appeared normal, but the sound persisted. Something was definitely not right. No, 3 nights later, almost exactly the same time, it happened again. I woke up before the sound started, hovering in that half-asleep state where you're just beginning to drift off. A strange pressure dropped, like the moments before a storm hits. Then the hum returned, deep and low. It seemed to vibrate from inside the walls. This time felt different. The frequency was identical to before, but now it pulsed and fluctuated slightly. I sat up, watching the windows move almost imperceptibly. My wife was awake too. She stared silently out the window, as if trying to see whatever was causing this strange phenomenon. We lay there listening, neither of us wanting to go outside. Something just felt wrong, though I couldn't explain why. After about 40 seconds, it cut off abruptly. The silence was exact, like something had suddenly snapped back into place. I checked my phone 2:19 a.m. the next morning. I reviewed our security camera footage. We have 2 cameras, one above the garage and another pointed at the backyard. Timestamp, I noticed a tiny flicker on the backyard cam at 2:17. Just a single frame. The screen jumped slightly like a brief technical glitch. No lights, no animals, no discernible sound. Earlier, I'd already tried investigating. I checked local Facebook groups, searching with keywords like loud noise and weird vibration. Nothing. No one had posted anything similar. I even called our next-door neighbor Joe, a retired electrician who notices everything. He claimed he was up late watching an old movie and heard nothing. When I pressed him about the loud hum and shaking windows, he just laughed and said, "Hey, maybe I was dreaming." Our son described the sound later at breakfast as a giant fridge hum floating over the house, which wasn't far off. I asked neighbors across the street the next day. Their response was the same. Nothing unusual had occurred. The first time it happened was sudden and inexplicable. No obvious source, no direction it seemed to come from. Then, just as quickly as it started, it was gone. Not faded, just off. The silence afterward was weirdly sharp, like the air had been sucked back to normal. My ears popped, and my wife came out into the hall whispering, "What the hell was that?" I went out on the front porch afterward. Everything was dead quiet. No cars, no wind, not even crickets. Our dog, who usually barks at everything, remained silent. No, I was walking back from the barn. After putting the lights out close to 11 p.m., the night was cool with wet grass. Not from rain, but from a heavy dew. Silence hung in the air, broken only by distant bug sounds and the low hum of grain dryers. Suddenly something caught my eye in the sky. It wasn't bright, in fact, I almost missed it entirely. 3 faint points of light moved together, forming a perfect triangle. They were dim, like stars barely visible through thin fog, but distinctly shaped and completely silent. The object passed overhead slowly, not like a plane, but more of a smooth glide. It moved steadily from west to east in a straight line, without wobbling or changing direction. I stood frozen in the grass, watching it drift until it disappeared behind the trees. Our front camera showed nothing. No footage, no movement, no evidence of what we experienced. We questioned our son the next morning. He said he had come back but didn't get up at the time. When we asked if he saw anything, he mentioned only that the wall had buzzed again. After that, we started keeping a notepad by the bed. A week passed with no incidents, and then it returned a third time, same hour, same exact sound. I went out on the porch, driven by an inexplicable impulse. The air was heavy and still, with no wind or bugs. The hum felt stronger outside. Pressing down from above, I looked up. Nothing seemed immediately unusual. Stars dotted the sky, with clouds barely moving. Yet something felt off. Not dramatically, but distinctly. I sensed something was present, too high to see, too quiet to track. Our dog approached the door and growled, low and steady. She didn't bark, just stared through the storm door. Then the sound stopped, following its previous pattern of all or nothing. That was the last time we heard it. I spent days checking with neighbors. No one reported anything. I asked around at the school pickup line and gas station, receiving only confused looks, as if I were describing a dream. But I know what I heard. We all heard it inside the house. It wasn't a plane, power lines, construction, or car base, and it never showed up on the cameras. Even weeks later, I still checked the footage occasionally, hoping something might appear. So far, nothing has. That morning started like any other, up at 5:30, coffee in hand, stepping out onto the porch before beginning my chores. The fog hung low over the backfield, with the sun just starting to peek through. Something was different with the cows. They weren't in their usual spot near the north fence by the hay ring. Instead, they were clustered at the far south end of the pasture, right up against the woods. At first, I thought maybe a coyote or some strange noise had disturbed them. But as I got closer, I realized this was far from normal. They weren't moving. Not a single cow was grazing or milling about. They stood perfectly still, shoulder to shoulder, lined up along the fence. No sounds, not even the usual chewing. Every single one faced the same direction, not toward me or the barn, but deep into the southeast woods, where the trees grow thick and dense. I walked carefully along the fence line, trying not to startle them. They didn't read. No ear flicks, no movement. When I clapped, only a few blinked. It felt like they were waiting for something. An uneasy feeling washed over me, like I was interrupting something I shouldn't be seeing. I decided to check the perimeter with the ATV. Maybe there were broken fence posts or tracks that might explain their behavior. But the grass was undisturbed. No prints, no drag marks, no fence damage. I circled the entire pasture and found nothing out of place. The cows remained in that same strange configuration all day. At lunch and again at dusk, they had shifted slightly, but most were still in the same spot, eerily quiet. A few grazed, but most just stood there, facing the same direction with that same unsettling stillness. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch, keeping watch. The barn lights stayed off, house lights low. Around 2:15 in the morning, the dog started growling at the back door, a low, persistent sound that sent chills down my spine. Here's a rewritten version focusing on reorganizing the content. The night was quiet. My dog stood steady by the screen door, watching the field and growling softly without barking. When I stepped outside, the sky was clear and star-filled with no clouds visible. 3 faint points caught my eye, forming a distinct triangle shape. This time, they moved differently, slower and lower, tracking north to south with no sound or trail. I watched until they disappeared. Something changed after that night. The cows behaved strangely. They wouldn't come near the barn and barely ate. When I tried herding them, they scattered quickly, always circling back to the same patch near the trees. On the third morning, one calf stood alone in the field's center, staring toward the woods the same direction the others had been focused on. It remained motionless for almost an hour, even when I approached. Eventually things normalized. The herd started grazing normally and returned to their routine. But something had shifted. They now avoid that southeast corner completely, and I've stopped going out after dark. Days later, another odd experience unfolded. I woke to an unnatural silence, no wind, no birds, just a heavy stillness that seemed to plug my ears. It had rained heavily overnight, and I remembered falling asleep around 2 or 3 a.m. when I unzipped my tent that morning. Something immediately felt wrong. Instead of expected mud and disorder, everything was meticulously arranged. My gear, backpack, sleeping bag, stove, food, water bottles, boots, clothes, and batteries were laid out in perfect, organized rows. Each item was precisely spaced, sorted by type, as if someone had carefully taken inventory. I stared, half asleep, trying to remember if I could have done this, but I knew I never unzipped my tent at night, especially not during rain. The muddy ground confirmed the heavy rainfall, yet my campsite was unnaturally pristine. Something unexplained had visited during the night. My tent was set in a quiet spot tucked between a rail bend and a small slope, with trees to the west and a creek to the east. I was deep in the wilderness, at least 6 miles from any access road. No other campers, no human sounds, just silence. When I started looking around, something felt off. The mud was unnaturally smooth, with no indentations anywhere, not even where my gear had been sitting. My sleeping bag looked dry, and when I picked it up, the underside was barely damp, as if it had just been set down moments ago. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal, of course. The last person I'd seen was a couple hiking in the opposite direction the afternoon before. We'd exchanged a quick hello. Now walking the campsite perimeter, I noticed something strange. No prints anywhere. I did circles around where my gear had been laid out, checked under clothes and equipment. Nothing disturbed the perfect mud surface. Back in the tent, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Sleeping pad zipped up, notebook and headlamp by my pillow, untouched. Then the unsettling reality sank in. Something had entered my tent, unpacked, and laid out my gear, then zipped it shut, without leaving a single trace in the mud. I didn't feel like eating or boiling water. Just sat on a log, watching the trees. No wind, no birds. The entire area felt suspended, paused. Something wasn't right. I decided to pack up, not rushing but not dawdling either. My original plan was 2 more nights, but this spot felt wrong. As I reached the trail and looked back, the campsite appeared completely normal, tent down, nothing left behind. Except one thing, my pocket knife. I always keep it clipped inside my pack's hip belt pocket, and I knew I'd packed it. Yet here it was, sitting at the clearing's edge, perfectly aligned, with an imaginary line pointing east, clean, no mud, no scratches, just waiting. The trail out was eerily silent, not just animal quiet, but completely devoid of sound. Like walking through a sealed room, I kept glancing back but saw nothing. After about a mile, sounds gradually returned. Now I was driving back from my brother's place in Franklin, taking longer than expected. The drive had me on those back roads between towns around midnight. I'd traveled this route plenty of times, so I wasn't too worried. Just me and the occasional deer on the shoulder. About 15 minutes from home, the fog started thickening. Not the rolling kind that drifts in patches, but the low, dense stuff that clings to the road. I came in fast. 1 second I could see the tree line. The next, only the hood of the car was visible with nothing beyond. I slowed down, not just because of visibility, but something felt off. The headlights were getting swallowed up too quickly. I kept glancing at the speedometer, checking my speed. The road had gone weirdly quiet. No engine hum, no gravel crunch. Then I rounded a curve near an old dairy farm, that spot with half-cleft fencing and a leaning oak on the right. That's when the light showed up. Just there. No flicker, no build-up. 1 second, just fog. The next, a blinding white light directly in front of my windshield. Not up ahead, but right in front of me, like I'd driven into a floodlight mounted on an invisible wall. I slammed the brakes without thinking. Everything turned white. I couldn't see the dashboard, my hands, anything. Just light, as if it filled the entire cabin. I wasn't warm. I didn't make a sound, but it pressed in on me. Like being underwater, but dry and frozen still. I blinked, held my hand up. Nothing, just solid white. I don't know how long it lasted. Could have been 5 seconds. Could have been a full minute. Then, just like that, it was gone. Dark again. Not a slow fade, but like someone shut off a switch. My eyes were useless for a few seconds after that, totally shot. I sat there in the middle of the road, gripping the wheel, not sure what had happened. After that night, something changed. I never reported it. Didn't tell anyone for a long time. Technically, nothing was missing. Nothing happened to me, but I stopped backpacking solo. I still go hiking, still camp, but not alone and not anywhere near that trail. Here's a rewritten version. Something felt strange that night. The road behind me was empty, with no headlights or glow in the thick fog. My low beams barely cut through a few feet of soupy darkness. The car's air felt weird, not hot, not cold, just heavy and stale. When I rolled down the window, fog poured inside. I started driving slower, sensing something was off. The road didn't feel right. I was so certain I'd missed a turn that I pulled over and checked Google Maps. The GPS confirmed I was still on County Route 12. But something didn't sit well. A blank billboard appeared suddenly, completely white, brand new, without any text or image. Later, I'd discover there was never a billboard on that stretch. Nothing in Street View history showed its existence. As I approached town, the fog mysteriously cleared. One moment it was thick as soup, the next completely gone. I pulled into my driveway just after 12:30. But here's where things got strange. My car clock read 12:34, while my phone and microwave both showed 1:07. I hadn't stopped for gas. I hadn't pulled over for more than a minute. That drive should have taken 25 minutes. Yet somehow, a half hour had vanished. I couldn't explain it. I didn't remember losing time or falling asleep. Days later, I drove the same route at night. Clear skies, no fog. The dairy farm, the curve, everything looked normal. The blank billboard was gone, replaced by an open field. I've driven that stretch at least a dozen times since. Never saw that light again. Never experienced that time discrepancy. But I don't take that road in the fog anymore. If I see fog rolling in, I'll take the highway, even if it adds 15 minutes. Some risks aren't worth taking. It happened about 5 years ago in July. We were out on the water, my cousin Gabe, 2 of his friends, Ricky and Dan, and me, taking Gabe's dad's 24-foot center console boat from a small marina in Rhode Island. This wasn't a fishing trip, just a nighttime cruise. The conditions were perfect. Calm water, clear sky, no moon, just stars everywhere. We drifted about 12 or 13 miles offshore, far enough that the coastline was just a faint glow behind us. Everything was incredibly quiet after we'd cut the engine about 10 minutes earlier. I was half dozing near the bow when Gabe broke the silence. "What the hell is that?" he asked, staring hard to starboard. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Ricky pointed. About 100 yards out, something strange was happening to the water's surface. Not a splash or a wave, but something pushing up from underneath, slow and smooth. No sound. Just a gentle rise, like a dome emerging. Then we saw the light, dull and steady, like a frosted bulb, pale blue or white. As it rose, the light grew brighter. The object came up maybe 20 or 30 feet, moving impossibly smoothly, almost like being lifted by an invisible crane. Its shape was odd, not a perfect sphere or disc, but a stretched oval, perhaps 10 feet tall and 15 feet wide. It rotated slowly, clockwise. The light seemed to emanate from the entire object, not from any specific point. It didn't reflect like a searchlight, but made the surrounding water appear less dark. After about a minute, it began descending exactly as it had risen. No noise, no splash. The water surface smoothed out as if nothing had happened. We sat in stunned silence. Gabe finally asked, "Did you guys all see that?" We all confirmed we had. Nobody was panicking or shouting, just processing what we'd witnessed. Dan reached for his phone, but none of us had filmed it. Somehow, it didn't feel like something that could be captured on video. The light behaved differently from anything normal, and the object cast no recognizable shadows. No, we'd been out on the water for hours, and the ocean remained eerily calm. No boats, no planes, just endless glassy water and stars overhead. After drifting for another half hour with nothing happening, Gabe started the engine, and we headed back to the dock. The return trip was quiet. I kept looking back over the stern, watching just in case. Once we arrived, Dan checked his phone and tried recording some audio. When he played it back, there was nothing unusual, just wind and low boat creaks. No hum, no splash. Ricky was different. He swore he'd felt a vibration in his chest when the thing was above water, like standing next to a massive speaker, only quieter. None of the rest of us had experienced anything similar. The next day, we talked it over. Nobody had dreamed the encounter. Nobody had been drinking. Nobody could explain what happened. In all my years on boats, I'd never seen anything like it. Not before, not since. Weeks later, I went hiking alone on a quiet trail through an unfamiliar forest patch, about 2 hours from the nearest town. My goal was simple: get some distance and clear my head. The trail was typical, just trees and dirt paths. A couple of hours in, my phone died. No big deal. I'd brought a handheld GPS as backup. When I turned it on, something strange happened. The screen lit up, but the map was glitching, jumping between locations unpredictably. I might have dismissed this as typical forest signal interference, but it only occurred in one specific clearing. Every time I passed through that space, the GPS would freeze, flicker, then snap back a few steps. At first, I thought it was device malfunction. As the sun began setting, I stopped in the clearing for a break. It was a small, open space, surrounded by pine trees. The light was dimming. I leaned against a tree, drank some water, and looked around. Everything seemed normal. Birds chirping, small animals rustling. Then I saw them. Footprints on the ground. Large ones, maybe size 11 or 12. Knight was working as a park ranger in a remote cabin deep in the forest. Night shifts were long and solitary, with only the occasional hiker or camper breaking the silence during the day. This particular night felt different, cold and heavy with an oppressive darkness. Around midnight, a faint tapping sound caught my attention outside the cabin. It wasn't loud, just a couple of gentle taps every few seconds, like someone softly knocking on a wooden post or tapping a branch. Initially, I thought it might be an animal, maybe a woodpecker or raccoon, but something felt off. The sound wasn't random or messy, like typical animal noises. Later, during a hike through the forest, I discovered something strange. The ground had clear, fresh footprints in the soft dirt. What was odd was that these prints led into a clearing but didn't lead back out, as if someone had stepped in and simply vanished. I examined the area carefully, checking if the prints might be hidden by leaves or scattered off the trail. Nothing. The prints themselves were unusual. The toes were longer and thinner than mine, and the heel was wider, almost triangular. At first I thought it might be an animal track, but it didn't match anything I knew, and the size was too large for most forest animals. The forest felt unnaturally quiet. Not just quiet, but like it was holding its breath. My GPS behaved strangely too, glitching only in that specific spot, freezing or jumping before settling back to normal. I passed through the clearing multiple times that day, and each time those weird footprints remained, leading in but never out. I didn't encounter any other hikers or campers that entire day. When I returned to my car that evening, I tried to make sense of it all. The GPS issues, the footprints that didn't leave the clearing, nothing added up. I checked online for any reports about strange occurrences in the forest. There were none. No missing persons, no weird phenomena. Sometimes I still think about that clearing, those footprints, and how the GPS seemed to not want me there. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just a small system glitch and tracks disappearing into nowhere. I don't go back to that place anymore. I kept a steady, almost mechanical rhythm as I moved. Tap, pause, tap, pause. My pace never changed. Glancing out the window, I saw only darkness, the faint outlines of trees swaying gently in a light breeze. No shadows, no movement caught my eye. Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped outside and swept the beam across the surroundings. Nothing emerged, no squirrels, no birds, no insects that could explain the tapping sound. The forest floor was bone dry, with no recent rain that might create dripping noises. Yet the tapping continued steady and persistent somewhere in the darkness. I circled the cabin multiple times, trying to pinpoint the sound's origin. It seemed to shift constantly, sometimes left, sometimes right, always just beyond the reach of my light. The source moved with an eerie precision, staying just out of clear view and making no additional noise. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone playing a prank? I searched carefully for any evidence, footprints, broken branches, anything that might reveal a presence, but morning revealed nothing. The ground remained undisturbed, as if untouched. Throughout the night, the tapping never stopped. Sleep became impossible. Each time I'd start to drift off, it wasn't loud enough to be truly disruptive, but consistent enough to create a growing sense of unease. I kept watching the window, half expecting to see something standing there. Each time only darkness greeted me. At some point, I noticed something strange. The rhythm subtly changed, speeding up slightly, then slowing down before returning to its original steady pace. It was so slight I might have imagined it, but something felt different. As if whatever was making the sound knew I was listening. No other sounds interrupted the night. No footsteps, no voices, no rustling of movement, just the tapping. Even the wildlife seemed to have gone silent. The wind died down, leaving only this persistent, mysterious sound. When dawn broke, I thoroughly investigated the area. I circled the cabin and followed a trail deep into the trees, searching for any clue. But I found nothing. No tracks, no marks on trees, no signs of anything unusual. Was I losing my mind? Note, here's the rewritten text. I was out on a solo fishing trip in a remote part of the country, a place I knew well, but had never experienced completely alone. This journey was meant to be simple. Just me, the lake, and a few days of uninterrupted fishing and camping. Solitude was exactly what I craved. Away from phones, people, and constant noise. As the sun began to set, I set up my small camp on a tiny peninsula jutting into the lake. Dense forest surrounded me, and the water lay perfectly calm. Cell signal was minimal, maybe 1 bar at most, which meant I was cut off from the usual world. I liked it that way. After setting up camp, I pulled out my compass to plan the next day's short hike. Something immediately struck me as odd. The needle wasn't just slightly off. It was spinning in complete circles, smooth and consistent. I thought maybe the compass was broken, but it was an old but reliable tool that had never given me trouble before. And a low humming sound began. It wasn't loud, more like a deep vibration you could almost feel in your chest. Think of a distant engine's quiet rumble, but steadier and more consistent. The compass needle kept spinning in sync with the hum. I stopped what I was doing and looked around. No planes, no trucks, nothing visible could explain the noise. The hum lasted maybe a minute or two, then abruptly stopped. At the exact same moment, the compass needle went completely still, pointing directly north as if nothing had happened. The silence afterward was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. Maybe the sound was something normal that I couldn't identify. But the strange thing is, I haven't heard anything like it before or since. If it had been an animal or a bird, wouldn't someone else have noticed? Yet no one ever reported anything unusual in that park. After that night, I kept checking the area around the cabin, listening carefully, but the tapping never returned. It was like it existed only for that one night. I can't explain what made the sound or why it seemed to be tapping right outside my cabin throughout the night. I just know it felt deliberate, as if something was trying to get my attention without revealing itself. Even now, back home in the quiet of the night, I sometimes swear I hear a faint tapping far off in the distance. What happened wasn't anything I could explain, and honestly, I still don't really know what to make of it. The night seemed suspended, as if the forest had paused mid-breath. A low hum and an unnatural stillness crept over me. I tried to dismiss it as a compass quirk or magnetic anomaly, but the feeling persisted. Later that evening, I sat by the fire, stars scattered across a clear sky. My thoughts kept circling back to the strange sensation. Across the lake, a soft white glow caught my attention. Unlike a campfire or flashlight, it hovered just above the ground, steady and hazy. My binoculars couldn't bring it into focus. I wondered if it might be deer eyes reflecting or a trick of firelight. But when I extinguished the fire, the light remained unchanged, neither brightening nor dimming. Sleep eluded me that night. Around 3 a.m., I awoke to that same low hum, now more intense. My watch read exactly 3:07. The compass lay near my sleeping bag, its needle spinning in full circles. For about 5 minutes the vibration continued, then stopped abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. An oppressive silence followed, my breathing suddenly thunderous in my ears. Peering outside, I saw nothing. No lights, no movement. The glow had vanished completely, The next morning, I packed up, eager to return to familiar surroundings. The experience seemed too bizarre to share. I double-checked the compass. It now pointed north normally. During the drive home, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something unusual. But there was only empty highway and trees. Since then, I've reflected on that night countless times. The spinning compass, the strange lakeside light, the unnatural silence. None of it makes sense. Something was present that defied explanation, something just beyond understanding. Every now and then, I'll catch that faint hum, usually when I'm somewhere quiet and alone. When it happens, the needle starts to twitch just a little, as if waiting to spin again. Working overnight. Security at a mostly empty office park just outside the city means long nights of stillness. Most evenings are uneventful, just the distant hum of traffic and occasional street lamp flickering. But one night changed everything. Around 2:30 a.m., something unusual appeared on the west side security camera. I was in the control room, monitoring screens of empty lots and locked doors. Suddenly, a small, bright white orb began moving slowly across the deserted parking lot. At first, I thought it might be a drone or someone's pranked with a flashlight. But this was different. No sound. No mechanical behavior. The orb floated smoothly from one side of the lot to the other, drifting like it was suspended in air. When I zoomed in, I noticed something strange. It didn't cast a shadow, didn't reflect off cars, and caused no environmental disturbance. No leaves moved, no wind stirred. Curious, I switched to the thermal camera overlay. Things got even weirder. The orb was completely invisible on thermal imaging. Normally, bright objects show some heat signature. A flashlight, car headlights, a person's body heat. But this, nothing. Pure glowing light with zero heat trace. I watched, transfixed, as it continued moving slowly. The surrounding air showed no temperature changes, no heat pockets, no warm currents. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the orb vanished. Blinked out like someone flipped a switch. Checking surrounding cameras revealed nothing unusual. No lights, no shadows, no vehicles or people. It was as if the orb existed in its own isolated space, briefly visible before disappearing completely. I was out riding my bike late one night, something I'd done countless times before. The streets feel different after midnight, empty, calm, almost like the world's taking a breath. This night started just the same. Cool air, empty roads, and me pedaling along. About 10 miles into my ride, I first noticed the lights. Initially, I thought they were just a car far behind me. Two faint but steady glows in the distance, nothing unusual. I expected them to pass me or turn off somewhere, but they didn't. Each time I glanced over my shoulder, the lights remained exactly the same distance behind, perfectly matching my speed. It seemed like someone was just following the same road, which happens sometimes late at night. But something felt off. These weren't typical car lights. No engine noise, no tail lights, no variations in brightness or angle like you'd expect from headlights navigating turns. Later, back at work, I found myself thinking about another strange encounter. I was in the parking lot when an unexplainable orb appeared. I searched everywhere. The asphalt was cold, the night calm like any other. No signs, no footprints, no tire marks, nothing unusual. The cameras and sensors revealed nothing. No wind, no heat changes, no sound. It was like a ghost light floating through a vacuum. I mentioned it to my supervisor, who suggested a camera glitch or weird reflection, but the footage was crystal clear. The orb moved smoothly and steadily. Sometimes when I'm sitting in the control room watching rows of empty lots, I think about that night. The silence, the stillness, and that glowing orb drifting through a place that should have been dead. I don't know what it was, and I'm not sure I want to find out, but it stuck with me. A quiet reminder that not everything out here fits with what we think is real. The two lights followed me with an eerie precision. When I sped up, they sped up too. When I slowed down, they matched my pace exactly. It felt like something was watching me, but I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. I scanned the road behind me, but saw nothing except those persistent lights. Engine, no hint of a vehicle, just two glowing points tracking my every move. At a red light, I stopped and looked back. In an instant, the lights vanished, disappearing as if they'd never existed. My heart racing, I took off again. Immediately, the lights reappeared, falling perfectly in sync with my speed. They mirrored every turn, every change I made with an unnerving accuracy that made my skin crawl. Empty neighborhood stretched out around me, dimly lit by street lamps and occasional porch lights. The lights remained constant, always just behind me. No matter how often I glanced over my shoulder, I saw only darkness where the lights should have been. I tried to shake them off, swerving sharply onto a side street. They followed, matching my movement without hesitation. No delay, no variation, just perfect, silent pursuit. Something wasn't right, and a deep unease began to settle over me. My breath grew shallow, hands gripping the handlebars tightly. I pedaled faster, hoping to lose whatever was tracking me, but the lights stayed steady, never closer, never further back. I took winding routes home, cutting through back streets and dark alleys, but nothing changed. No explanation made sense. No sound, no visible vehicle, no reflections, just those two unwavering points of light. When I finally reached my street and stopped at the corner, they vanished once more, leaving me with nothing but a profound sense of being watched. I set up camp that night like I usually do when I want to get away from everything. It was late summer, just past the busy season, and I figured the spot I picked would be quiet enough. I found a small clearing in the woods, a little off the main trail. Nothing special, but private. I pitched my tent, laid out my sleeping bag, and settled in for the night. The usual forest sounds were there. Crickets, distant frogs, a soft rustling of leaves when the wind kicked up. Nothing unusual. I was exhausted from the hike and didn't bother double-checking the tent zipper. I just zipped it closed, crawled inside, and fell asleep almost right away. When I woke up the next morning, it was still early, just the faint light of dawn creeping through the trees. I rubbed my eyes and noticed immediately that the tent zipper wasn't fully closed. It was open about a third of the way down, enough to slip a hand or head through if someone wanted. I sat up slowly, heart starting to beat a little faster, and scanned around inside. Nothing seemed missing or disturbed. My bag was still where I left it. My phone and keys were right there on the floor next to me. I'm not the type to freak out over things like this, mostly because I've been camping a lot and know how wildlife and wind can mess with tents. But this felt different. I hadn't heard a thing during the night. No noises, no rustling, no sniffing, or anything that might explain how the zipper came undone. I pulled myself out and stepped outside, looking around carefully. That's when I saw it. A perfect circle of grass, maybe 3 feet across, right next to my tent. The grass inside that circle was completely crushed flat, like something heavy had pressed down hard on it, but nothing else was around. No footprints, no tire tracks, no broken branches. Later, I rode the last block home as fast as I could, locked my bike up, and went inside without looking back. I've thought about that night a lot. The lights had followed me, matching every move, disappearing when I stopped. It wasn't a car, not a bike, nothing I could explain. The quiet, the way they moved, the total lack of any noise or reflection. I still feel off, like something was out there watching me but not wanting to be seen. I keep wondering if I'm crazy or if maybe I was just tired and imagining things. But I know what I saw. The lights were real and they weren't just behind me by chance. Night had fallen, and I was heading home on the last train out of the city after a late shift. The car was nearly empty, with just a handful of tired passengers scattered about. Around 11:30 p.m., the usual train noise was subdued, most people lost in their headphones or drifting off to sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the darkness. Weeks earlier, during a camping trip, something strange had happened that still haunted me. I discovered a perfect circular area of flattened grass near my tent, so precisely cut it looked like a giant cookie cutter had been used. The sight was weird enough to freeze me in place. I circled the area, tried to understand what could have created such a mark. No large animals were nearby, and no signs of crawling or stepping were visible. The ground was dry, with no mud or loose dirt to show any prints, just that strange circle of compressed grass. Puzzled, I went back to my tent and double-checked my gear. Everything seemed untouched, with no indication anyone had been there except for the slightly pulled-down zipper. I began to feel uneasy. Had I imagined leaving the zipper open? Its position didn't look like something I'd done. It seemed as if someone had unzipped it from the outside and then closed it partially. Running my fingers over the zipper track revealed no snags or dirt that might explain its mysterious movement. Deciding not to spend the night wondering what might be lurking outside, I packed up quickly. Walking back to my car, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something, but the trail remained empty. During the drive home, I tried to rationalize the experience. Maybe an animal was responsible. Perhaps I'd been careless, or sleep had moved the zipper unconsciously. Back in town, I showed the photos to camping-experienced friends. They found it strange, but suggested a heavy bird or animal might have caused the circle. Yet nothing added up. No feathers, no droppings, no other marks. The mystery of the grass circle and tent zipper continued to gnaw at me. It felt like something had been right there, just outside my tent, without leaving any trace. Whatever it was seemed to want me to know of its presence, while simultaneously remaining invisible. To this day, I still don't know what happened that night. The city lights were fading behind me as we rolled through patches of woods and empty fields. My phone lay forgotten in my hand, my attention drawn repeatedly to the window. Something about the rain's rhythm and the blurring night made my mind wander. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a helicopter or drone hovering just beyond the trees. But this was different. No blinking lights, no familiar sounds. Just a silent presence floating around 200 feet off the ground, perfectly steady as rain rolled past. I blinked and refocused, wondering if it was a trick of light or a window reflection. But no, this thing was definitely out there. A dark, oval shaped like a flattened egg, maybe 30 or 40 feet long. No markings, just a smooth matte surface that seemed to absorb whatever light surrounded it. It didn't look mechanical like typical aircraft. Instead, it felt organic, though without any recognizable features like windows or rotors. As the train curved around bends, the shape shifted subtly but maintained its position, always the same distance away. I glanced around at other passengers, but nobody else seemed to notice. They were absorbed in phones or staring out other windows. Should I say something? But how would that sound? Hey, there's a weird floating thing outside. I'd sound crazy. When we passed a small rural station where the train typically slows, I caught a glimpse of its underside. No engines, no landing gear, just that strange, smooth mass. I tried to take a picture, but my phone screen only made the window reflective. Each time I aimed the camera, the object seemed to fade slightly, as if aware of my attention. Then things got stranger. My phone lost all signal, no bars, complete dead zone. The little compass spun wildly, confused. I attempted to call my wife, but the call wouldn't connect. I tried sending a text, no delivery confirmation. As the train slowed approaching a larger station, the object simply vanished. No flash, no sound, just gone. I was out on the lake alone, like I often am on weeknights. Fishing at night isn't exactly popular where I live, so it's usually just me, my boat, and the water. That night was late September, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock. The air was cool but not cold, and the lake was calm. No wind, no waves, just still water that looked like glass under the moonlight. I'd been out for a couple hours, just drifting and casting my line, waiting. The night was quiet, except for the occasional splash or the hum of insects near the shore. I wasn't really expecting anything unusual, just the usual peaceful fishing routine. Around 10:30, I looked up and noticed something odd near the far edge of the lake, close to where the trees meet the water. There was this cluster of lights arranged in a perfect triangle, maybe 30 or 40 feet across. The lights weren't blinking or flashing, just steady, like little white LEDs evenly spaced at the points of the triangle and one in the middle. They were low, almost touching the water's surface. At first, I thought maybe someone had set up a fishing float line with lights or something like that, but there was no boat or dock nearby, no signs of any activity. I looked out where I had been, but the trees and dark fields were empty again. When the train stopped at the station, I checked my phone again. The signal was back. GPS locked in. Calls and texts worked fine. I tried to show the other passengers, but they all just shrugged and went back to their phones. Later, I checked flight trackers online just to see if anything unusual was logged around that area in time. Nothing. No drones, no helicopters, no aircraft registered in the skies. The next day, I asked a co-worker who's into aviation if that kind of silent hovering was possible for any known aircraft. He said nothing with that size and silence exists. especially not in civilian airspace and definitely not without being logged. I thought about it for days. I replayed the scene in my mind. The way the thing moved, the way my phone acted, it didn't make sense. I felt like some part of the world was acting weird, like the rules I thought were solid were bending just a little. I never told anyone else. People would think I was nuts or making it up, but every now and then when I'm alone at night, especially on quiet train rides, I find myself looking out the window, half expecting to see that shape hovering silently again. The water was perfectly still, no movement at all, which felt odd because normally even a stationary light would create some kind of disturbance. I pointed my flashlight toward the lights from a distance, trying to get a better look. The moment the beam touched them, the entire formation vanished. They didn't dim or turn off. They simply disappeared instantly, as if someone had remotely switched them off. I sat there, blinking and scanning the area, but the lights didn't return. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks, or this was some strange reflection. So I edged the boat closer, slowly shining the flashlight around where they had been. Nothing. Then, after a couple of minutes, the lights reappeared in the exact same triangular pattern, floating silently on the water with no visible source. Each time I pointed my light, they would vanish. When I turned it off, they returned. No pattern, no warning, just gone and back, seemingly responding directly to my flashlight. The silence was eerie. No engine sounds, no boat noises, even the water remained undisturbed, as if the triangle was hovering without leaving a trace. My phone screen flickered oddly when I tried to take a picture, struggling to focus in the darkness before going completely black. By the time I got it working, the lights had disappeared again. I spent the next half hour drifting around, searching for an explanation. If this was a boat or human setup, there would at least be a ripple or wake. But there wasn't. Eventually, I decided to head back to shore. On the ride home, I tried convincing myself I'd imagined it or seen some strange light trick on the water. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd witnessed wasn't normal. No boat, no equipment, just a perfect triangle of lights floating silently, vanishing whenever light touched them. I've returned to the lake several times since, usually at the same time of night, hoping to see something again or find a logical explanation. Nothing. Just the usual quiet water. No lights, no ripples, no sound. I was out for my usual evening jog through a quiet suburb where nightfall brought a sense of stillness. Street lights flickered on at regular intervals, and most houses appeared dark except for a few dimly lit windows. Running here always helped clear my head after a long day. With headphones on but volume low, I could barely hear anything beyond my own breathing and footsteps. About halfway through my usual route, something strange caught my attention. A faint light flickered behind me. At first, I assumed it was a reflection from a car's headlight or a blinking porch light. But there were no cars on the street, and the surrounding houses remained dark. The light flickered again, a tiny spark in the distance, and then vanished. Glancing back revealed nothing. Just an empty street and shadows. No people, vehicles, or dog walkers were in sight. I shrugged it off, thinking it might be a trick of the streetlights or a bug near my glasses. Minutes later, the same thing happened. That same elusive flicker appeared just behind me, always just far enough away to defy clear identification. Each time I turned to look, the street remained completely empty. The silence grew heavier, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Something about this felt wrong. The light never approached closer, never changed position. It wasn't like a flashlight or phone screen, too faint and irregular, resembling a candle flame struggling in a breeze. I became increasingly uneasy. My location was pretty remote. The local marina and nearby fishermen hadn't reported anything similar. No boat traffic existed this late at night, and no logical explanation existed for such precisely arranged lights to appear here. Sometimes I wonder if I should have stayed longer, tried to get closer, or called someone to witness it with me. But something about the way those lights vanished whenever I shined my flashlight made me hesitate. It felt like I was being watched, yet whoever or whatever it was didn't want me to see. That night remains a blurred line between what I know and what I don't. I'm not certain what I saw, but the memory has stayed with me ever since. No one bothered me, but the feeling of being watched crept in. My legs kept moving, though my head darted backwards constantly. I checked the houses on both sides, dark and lifeless, with no signs of movement. At one point, I stopped completely and listened. The street was silent except for a distant lawn sprinkler humming somewhere down the block. A light flickered at the edge of a cul-de-sac, pulling me toward it somehow, as if it wanted me to notice. I pulled out my phone and opened the flashlight app, hoping to catch whatever was causing this strange sensation. Slowly scanning the empty road and sidewalks, the beam revealed nothing. The light vanished. I started running again, but more cautiously now. Every few seconds, I'd catch that faint flicker behind me, never coming closer, never making a sound, just a little light trying to stay hidden in plain sight. Near the end of my route, I reached a small park completely shrouded in darkness. No streetlights at all. Breeze moved tree shadows added to the eerie atmosphere. Catching my breath, I spotted the flicker just beyond the tree line. When I pointed my phone's flashlight, a vague silhouette blended with the darkness momentarily. I blinked, and it disappeared. No rustling, no movement, just silence. Unwilling to linger, I jogged toward home, constantly glancing over my shoulder. The light stayed with me, never getting closer, never leaving, just softly flickering like a distant warning. Upon reaching my street, the flicker vanished. I stopped running and stood outside, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. Inside, I locked the door and sat down with a cup of tea, but the quiet didn't settle my racing thoughts. That night, I kept waking up feeling watched from the darkness beyond my window. Though I never saw the light again, I'm pretty sure it's still out there somewhere, flickering just out of reach. My routine evening shift seemed ordinary at first, just me in the sky. As a small charter pilot making short regional airport hops, I'm used to uneventful flights. This particular night, I was flying from a small upstate town to a city 2 hours north. The weather was clear, winds calm, perfect flying conditions. Cruising at about 25,000 feet halfway through the flight, I noticed something odd out the left side of the plane, and I was flying routine when something caught my eye outside the window. At first, it looked like a reflection in my cockpit glass, but quickly I realized this wasn't moving with me. The object was a solid shape, maybe 2,000 feet away, hovering perfectly still. It wasn't like any aircraft I'd seen before. No blinking lights, no engines, no contrails. When I focused, I saw it was completely smooth and reflective, like a mirror floating in the sky. The faint outline of the sunset was visible on its surface, but no structure or seams. Just a dark, shiny shape hanging silently beside me. Initially, I thought it might be a weather balloon or research drone, but it didn't behave like one. It didn't drift with the wind or change altitude. When I slightly altered my course by a few degrees, it followed me, maintaining the exact same distance and angle. It felt almost like it was watching me. I called the control tower and reported a traffic advisory. They didn't see anything on radar. I described the shape, and they simply told me to maintain my heading and keep an eye out. No other planes reported anything nearby. A strange unease settled over me, not panic, but definitely something was off. I've flown at night in weird weather, seen satellites, planes, birds, but nothing like this. The object matched my moves without ever closing distance or showing typical aircraft characteristics. After about 10 minutes, I radioed the company dispatcher and explained what I was seeing. They hadn't heard anything. No radar reports, no other pilots mentioning anything unusual. I kept the object in sight, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't until I started descending toward the airport that it vanished. No warning, acceleration. Just gone, like it had never existed. I scanned the sky, but it had completely disappeared. The rest of the flight remained normal, though I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see it again. After landing and shutting down the plane, I checked my flight logs and radar data. Nothing unusual except some brief signal interference at the time of the sighting. I've tried telling people what I saw, but most dismiss it as weather balloons or cockpit hallucinations. But I know what I experienced. Something real. Something that doesn't fit any explanation I've encountered in all my years of flying. Since then, I double-check my instruments and stay alert for anything out of the ordinary. Tyler and I were backpacking near Donner Pass one Thursday in early October. We'd chosen a spot far enough from the highway to feel disconnected from civilization. The trailhead was empty when we arrived, which suited us perfectly. Our first day went smoothly. The weather was cool, skies were clear, and the trail conditions were good. We hiked about 5 miles and set up camp in a small clearing just below a ridge. It wasn't an official campsite, but it looked flat, dry, and had a good spot to hang our bear bag. That night we ate freeze-dried chili, chatted for a bit, and turned in around 10 o'clock. The temperature dropped more than I expected, and I kept waking up trying to warm my feet. Tyler, meanwhile, slept soundly. Around 3 o'clock or 4 in the morning, I was half awake when I heard a faint popping sound. It wasn't like branches breaking, but more like distant static or a dying campfire's crackling. Not close, but not far either. I sat up briefly, trying to determine if it was real or just in my head. The next morning was cloudy, which seemed odd given the clear forecast. The air felt heavy as if a storm was coming, though it never rained. While packing up, Tyler called me over to show something strange. About 15 feet from our tent, he discovered a trail of boot prints in the dirt. They matched my boot tread in spacing and depth, leading straight to our tent. Oddly, there were no return tracks. I thought maybe I'd gone out at night to relieve myself and forgotten, but my pants were clean. Tyler was certain he hadn't gotten up either. We followed the tracks into the trees. About 30 feet in, they simply stopped, as if whoever made them had walked in a straight line from the forest edge to our tent and then vanished. No broken branches, no disturbed ground beyond that point. Just nothing. The feeling was unsettling. We hadn't seen anything overtly dangerous, but the unexplained nature of those tracks left an eerie sense that something was watching us. A part of me still wonders if something is out there in the vast sky, silent and still. Tyler and I had been on a hiking trip that took an unexpected turn. After a night that messed with my head, Tyler went quiet. He's usually the one cracking jokes and talking constantly, but for the next couple hours, he barely said a word. I asked if he wanted to cut the trip short, but he was determined to finish. He suggested we might sleep at a different site the next night, so we hiked on, covering another 4 miles deeper into the woods and climbing to a higher ridge with more open views. The trail was tougher with more switchbacks, but moving helped us both feel better. Our second campsite was smaller, surrounded by thick trees with no open clearing this time. We picked a spot just off the trail and set up camp. I kept checking the ground near the tent, scanning for tracks, but found nothing. Just our own footprints between the fire ring and our bags. That night felt more normal. We made pasta and talked about high school bands and weird teachers. The previous night seemed like a strange one-off incident, maybe a trick of light or an animal that left oddly shaped prints. Around 3 a.m. I woke up again, cold and uncomfortable, but this time something else caught my attention. A low sound, barely audible. It wasn't quite a hum, but a deep vibration at the edge of hearing. It came and went, pulsing almost imperceptibly. I thought it might be wind through the trees, but when I held my breath and listened, the branches weren't moving. The sound lasted maybe 10 or 15 seconds before fading. I wanted to ask Tyler if he heard it, but he was sound asleep. I sat motionless in my sleeping bag, listening intently. Nothing else happened. Morning brought clear skies. We packed up quietly and started hiking back, neither of us mentioning the sound or the mysterious footprints. We didn't need to. Back at the car, we both checked our boots again, noticing the same strange prints. This only unsettled us more. If they were ours, we'd remember. And if not, there were no other vehicles at the trailhead, and no other hikers had passed us. Later, I worked the night shift at a small gas station just outside town, the kind of place where streets are empty, and the only sounds are occasional cars and humming fluorescent lights. It wasn't a bad job, mostly quiet, but sometimes that silence got weird. That night, I was doing my usual late shift routine at the small gas station. Close to 2 a.m., I was the only person on site, sweeping floors, checking pumps, and making sure the bathrooms weren't a mess. Just another typical overnight shift. The security cameras covered everything: the pumps, store interior, and parking lot. Even though nothing much happened after midnight, I still kept an eye on the monitors out of habit. Around 2:05, something bizarre caught my attention on the parking lot security feed. A sudden massive white light flashed, way bigger than a camera flash. It lasted less than a second but illuminated the entire lot like daylight. What really threw me was the timestamp. It jumped forward exactly 6 minutes, from 2:05 to 2:11, as if those minutes never existed. I rewound the tape multiple times, but each replay showed the same strange pattern. The flash would appear, and then, Boom, 6 minutes vanished. The footage before and after looked completely normal, with no visible glitches. Everything else on the system worked perfectly, and the audio picked up absolutely nothing unusual. Curious, I went outside to investigate. The pavement was dry with no unexpected tire marks or footprints. The pumps were intact, and nothing seemed out of place. Looking up, I saw a clear sky with a few stars, no clouds. No planes or helicopters were visible or audible. Initially, I thought it might be electrical interference or a power surge, but the precision was too perfect. Exactly 6 minutes missing. This detail kept nagging at me. I checked the gas station's computer logs, and they confirmed something even stranger. No transactions, no door alarms, no motion alerts during those 6 minutes. The lot appeared completely empty, with no cars entering or leaving. When I told my manager the next day, he dismissed it as a technical glitch, saying cameras sometimes malfunction. I tried to let it go, but something about that missing time kept bothering me. Over the next few nights, I watched the same camera's footage carefully, hoping to understand what caused that flash or the time gap. But I found nothing. No quiet nights, no usual routine, just the same empty parking lot. But something changed a few nights later. Around 2 a.m., a shadow moved just outside the camera frame near the lot's edge. I caught it for a second, a figure standing still, but invisible on other cameras. I checked the angle and it seemed impossible for anyone to be here without being seen. I walked the entire perimeter, finding nothing. No footprints, no signs of recent activity. Strange feelings started creeping in during my shifts. Not like someone standing right next to me, but a presence beyond sight. Small noises would catch my attention, faint rustling, or a distant electronic buzz. Yet whenever I looked, nothing was there. The night after seeing the shadow, I decided to sit outside during my break. Maybe I was just going stir-crazy. The night was clear and cold, and I leaned against my car watching the lot. Suddenly, a small dim light flickered in the distance beyond the gas station's property, near the tree line. Not a car or flashlight, just a steady, blinking white light. I thought someone might be camping nearby, so I grabbed my flashlight and walked close to the lot's edge. The light vanished the moment I stepped off the pavement into the grass. I called out a few times, but no one answered. It felt like the light disappeared before I could get close. Back at the lot, I tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe it was a campsite flashlight or a distant road reflection, but something didn't feel right. The next day, I pulled the security footage. At exactly 2:03:45, the camera caught another bright flash, fainter this time, a dull glow. The timestamp jumped forward, with 4 minutes missing between 2:45 and 2:07:45. The footage afterward showed an empty lot with no signs of disturbance. I started tracking these occurrences. No clear pattern emerged. Sometimes 6 minutes missing, sometimes 4, sometimes just 2. The flashes happened only at night, always in early morning hours, and only on that one parking lot camera. Not because I feared robbery, but because something felt off. A strange quietness hung in the air, like something was lurking just beyond. My perception messing with the cameras, and possibly with me. One night near closing time, a soft hum drifted outside. It wasn't mechanical or vehicle related, but more like a steady vibration hanging in the air. When I stepped out to investigate, scanning the lot, the hum briefly intensified before vanishing completely. Nothing seemed unusual, just an empty lot and quiet street pumps. I kept monitoring the cameras, hoping to catch whatever was causing this disturbance. Yet each time I checked, the footage showed only an empty lot and the typical streetlight flickering. About a week ago on my last shift, another strange event occurred. A bright white light suddenly filled the screen for a second with a timestamp inexplicably jumping forward 6 minutes. Reviewing the footage carefully, I noticed something at the frame's edge, a dark blur moving slowly out of view. I rewound and replayed multiple times. It was subtle, potentially just a trick of light, but I was certain it hadn't been there before. Shaken, I left my shift early and haven't returned since. Whenever I think about those missing minutes and sudden flashes, an unsettling feeling washes over me. Something was present that I can't explain. One final review before deleting the footage confirmed everything. The bright flash, missing time, and blurry shape remained, staring back from my screen. During a solo weekend hike on my usual trail near the ridge, I experienced another bizarre incident. It was late afternoon, and I was climbing switchbacks as the sun lowered. The air felt unusually still for spring. Stopping for a break in a small clearing, I encountered something truly bizarre. Dozens of birds lay dead, arranged in a perfect, flawless circle approximately 15 feet across. Various species, sparrows, finches, and a few crows, were positioned with unnatural precision. No blood, no signs of attack, just an eerie, silent arrangement. I stood transfixed, trying to comprehend this inexplicable scene. Something was definitely not right. The forest was silent, not just quiet, but a thick, heavy silence that felt unnatural. No birds singing, no rustling leaves, nothing. Usually, even late in the day, you'd hear something. Bugs, animals, the wind through the trees. But here, everything had stopped. My attention was drawn to a strange circle of fine grey dust covering the birds. It looked like ash or pollen, but wasn't blowing around or coming from any nearby trees. The dust just coated them evenly, like a powder. When I reached out and touched one carefully with my gloved hand, it felt dry, almost chalky. I looked all around, searching for an explanation. A nest nearby, a predator's lair, a trap, nothing. No footprints except mine, no disturbed plants or branches, no smell of decay or... My heart started to speed up, but I kept telling myself to stay calm. I took out my phone to take pictures, but the battery was low and the signal spotty up here. The photos came out oddly, like the dust reflected the light strangely. In some shots, the circle looked almost brighter than it did to the naked eye. I didn't want to stay too long. The sun was slipping fast and the forest was getting darker. Something about the scene kept pulling my eyes back to the circle. I took a few steps back, then turned around. That's when I noticed the complete stillness. I felt like I was being watched, but every time I looked, nothing was there. No movement, no eyes shining in the underbrush, just me in the darkening woods. When I got back to my car, I checked the photos again. One showed a faint, almost circular blur above the birds, like a shadow or a haze, but I couldn't tell what it was. I tried zooming in, adjusting the contrast, but it didn't clear up. I told a few friends about it later, but they just shrugged it off. Said maybe I'd stumbled on a weird natural event or some prank. I keep going over it in my head, trying to explain what I saw and felt. The circle, the dust, that silence. It doesn't make sense. I went back a week later, but the circle was gone. Just normal forest floor. No sign anything had happened here. It's like it was never real. I'm not sure what I stumbled on that day. I'm not sure I want to know, but it's something that's been lingering in my thoughts lately.